Hello, Tolkien geeks, and welcome back to Voice of Geekdom Live. This is your weekly roundup of the Rings of Power. This is my analysis show. We're here to talk about episode 6, which was Udun. Very action-packed episode, as we were expecting. Lots going on. We stuck to the one plot thread all the way through, so there was no kind of cuts to other parts of the world in this episode, so it was very focused. So what we're going to do this week is just go through the whole episode and talk about everything in sequence. I have another wonderful panel today. We've got Timbo Took on my right, returning guest. Timbo has a channel on YouTube where he does kind of painting, instructional, educational content, dressed as a Hobbit character. Timbo Took.
Yes.
Are you a Harfoot, or are you a Store or a Fallowhide? I guess you have to be a Fallowhide if you're a Took.
Yes. So I wrote my character Timbo is the grandson of Peregrine and Samwise.
Right. So from the Fallowhide clan. And down below we have a new guest to the channel, a long-time friend of mine, but we've never really spoken face-to-face like this, so this is fun. We've got Joshua from Tolkien Lore. Kind of one of the long-running channels on YouTube. Been around, 5-6 years, I think?
6 this year.
Yeah, so massive fan, and it's great to have you on. It's funny, I always introduce as hello Tolkien geeks, and this is a man who calls himself the Tolkien geek. A definite article there, but it's well earned because you are a real aficionado and geek, and just look at his backdrop, people. That's amazing. Here I am in my lousy office with a nice wardrobe behind me, and I've got Timbo with his paintings and Tolkien Lore with his armory.
There's more than this too.
Yeah. How big is your collection of nudie memorabilia and stuff? Because you've got a few weapons I've seen.
I think these are all the weapons. I do have Aragorn's crown. I have, I don't know how well you can see exactly up there, but Aragorn's ring is up there.
The Ring of Battle here.
Yes, the Aragorn's pipe. The letter opener is also on Duril. I've got, I think it's kind of oddly placed, but there's actually a cheap one ring replica, not a really nice one. And I've got some other things lying around. I can't even remember all of it, but this is some of the best stuff other than the crown of LSR.
Yeah, I'm not in my normal office. Usually I have posters behind me at least, but yeah, very cool. So yeah, welcome to the channel. It's great to have you on. We are also expecting Chris from ThePhilosophersGames.
I think he just put something in the chat a couple minutes ago. I think he's back.
Okay, I'm going to add Chris in. Chris, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, and nice to be here now in this chat. I also tried to promote your stream here a little bit while I was streaming a couple of minutes ago. And so I'm sorry we started late because you had to wait for me for a moment.
Oh, no, not a problem. I was also running behind on production stuff as well. I've got my screenshots lined up now, so I'm going to put those on screen in just a moment. But yeah, Chris is probably requires no introduction, long-time kind of friend of the channel, and we've done a lot of content on each other's channels, especially over the last year or so. So yeah, welcome back, and it's great to have you on for one of these. It's very late for Chris as well in Germany, so it's possible that he won't make it all the way through the entire stream, but we'll see how we do. Chris is a man with great stamina, so we'll see.
Yeah, that's a thing I'm kind of known for. So
very long videos and very long streams. Yeah,
yeah, definitely.
And so great to see all the chat as well. It's nice to see people here. Got Mr. Dwarf Bankety Bang, which is an excellent name. Nice to see you. Never seen you before. I think it's a new viewer. Asteroid TV. We've got Lyanna Stark. That's the wrong fantasy universe for you, but it's nice to see you too.
She was on my stream a couple of minutes ago.
And Joe's I think a regular viewer. Alison, one of my mods. Got Ares Aurelian, which is a cool name too. Kugel Blitz is a regular. The Ring of Battle here. So Gandalf thinks he has found Isildur's heir. He's a fool. We've got Kate Bertinsky, another one of my mods. We've got Emil. It's great to see so many people starting out on the stream here. There's good numbers to start with. I'm going to tweet this in a minute, so hopefully we'll get a few more views.
Oh yeah,
a few
tweeting.
more
I forgot about that.
Right.
I posted on my channel that we were going to be live too, so hopefully that gets some people from my side of the world.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, it's nice to see all of you. Speaking of like your side of the world, I always say this at the beginning. If you're watching and you're in the chat right now, just let me know where you're watching from, because it's always good to see people from all time zones and countries and continents watching. It gives me a little thrill, and it's one of the reasons I like doing this, is reaching so many people around the world. But yeah, I think we'll get into the episode before too long. Liana says, my fantasy universe went bad and I migrated. Love it.
It's funny, a lot of people are saying the reverse right now.
Well, yeah, some are, yeah. I'm really enjoying House of the Dragon, actually. I was thinking about covering that show on the channel, but with them being on at the same time, I was just like, no, thank you. Because I am a Song of Ice and Fire fan. Not as big of a fan as I am of Tolkien, but I do enjoy it. And I like the TV show. But yeah, no time. So
yeah, don't want to switch with Robert here, who has to cover 2 shows at the same time.
Yeah, he's very busy at the moment. Yeah. I would have definitely had him on one of these at some point if it wasn't for that as well. So it's disappointing.
Yeah, I tried to get him on my stream as well, but simply schedule-wise, impossible.
But yeah, let's go round and just talk about our high-level impressions of this newest episode. I think I'm going to go around clockwise. So let's start with Tim. How did you feel about this one, and what were your impressions? And did you enjoy it more than previous episodes, or how are you feeling?
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed this one more than previous episodes. I really, I knew this was coming, and I wanted to get here probably about episode 3. I don't have a problem with character development, but I just felt like we weren't getting new reveals in character development these past couple episodes. It was just kind of going over the same thing again and again and again. So, but yeah, as far as this episode went, it was one I was waiting for, and visually to see the end of it, that was really cool. Good payoff.
Yeah, I think the visuals are pretty strong for the most part, and for me, there were a few kind of fight sequences that didn't quite work or were just a little bit too much. But the battle was pretty exciting. You can argue about the logic of some of it too, but it's
and we will.
And we'll get into it as we go through. I know Tolkien lore tends to be more critical of this show than some other channels.
In my channel,
we're all in the middle. But...
Yeah, and I'm focused. With my channel is mainly the visuals. So that's kind of what I'm looking for each time. So I probably out of all the other channels have the biggest payoff.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true.
Yeah, you've got loads of new art to think about painting. I can see Sauron there behind you from episode 1 from the flashback. I haven't watched much of your stuff lately, so I don't know whether you've been doing exclusively visuals from the show or.
Well, I've been a little busy, and so I haven't had as many paintings out as I was earlier in the year, and which kind of seems backwards in this big build up to the show. But I figure this will give me some paintings I can do for the next year or so in between the seasons. So.
Yeah. Okay. And so I've already kind of said that, Josh, you tend to be kind of like slightly more critical of the show in general. I kind of am aware of some of your views on it. How did you feel about this latest episode? Was it an improvement or?
I definitely thought it was an improvement over episode 5. I hated episode 5, and the reason, like, one of the things that I really look at is the logical coherence, because I mean, for those who don't know, I'm actually a lawyer, and logic is kind of important to me. So the logical coherence of the story is really, really critical. Like, if I can't buy that the story makes sense, it's really going to hurt it. Most of the stuff in this episode wasn't completely suspension of disbelief breaking. There were things that, like you mentioned earlier, are problematic from that's a bad decision, but they're not like contradictory level.
Mm.
And so it wasn't as bad as episode 5. And I thought there were some really interesting character moments, especially with Galadriel and Isildur and Elendil on the one hand, and then Galadriel and Adar on another hand.
Yeah.
There was some good moments in this episode that I liked, but there were just so many of the same problems that have plagued the series throughout from my perspective. Just the clunky writing, it's like it could have been a legitimately good episode, but it just didn't manage to rise above, I think, what it's been dealing with the whole time. I wouldn't say it's the best episode so far. I think probably the best episode is probably episode 2 or 3. Well, 3. I mean, honestly, my favorite stuff is mostly Elrond and Durin, although they kind of screwed that up in episode 5, so now that's kind of ruined for me. But like my overall impression of this one was, it was, like you said, the action, there's some problems there, but I can be kind of forgiving with some of that stuff because I'm more about the logical coherence of the narrative and whatnot. So this one didn't absolutely beat me down on that. So I thought it was at least an enjoyable episode if you don't nitpick too much. Like in my review, I nitpick, but that's kind of the point of the review. So yeah, I mean, I thought this was one of the better episodes, and I think it definitely got a lot from the fact that it was a focused narrative and really spent time on just a few of the characters and didn't branch out into all 4 different plot lines scattered all across Arda. So I think that helped it a lot too.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Most of that, I think. I also really disliked episode 5, primarily because of the very strange Mithril plotline that they did, which I know a lot of people had issues with, especially people who know the books well. This one was exactly what I was hoping for beforehand, minus a few minor quibbles. I have no kind of like overriding downsides to this episode. Like there were a few scenes that just didn't quite come off, but this was a big return to form, and I did enjoy this one a lot. Don't have too much to say about that, but I think we're in agreement. Chris, how about yourself? We tend to agree on a lot of things, but how did you feel about this episode? Because I haven't really seen your thoughts on this yet.
Yeah, it was an interesting episode, I think. It also, I would agree with Josh that it was one of the better episodes. I'm not sure if it's my favorite. Maybe 2 is still my favorite as well. But I guess pretty close. It does some stupid stuff. Like it's certainly a common theme I feel in this show so far, that they do some cool stuff, but everything is always also a bit with terrible stuff combined. Like it neutralizes each other kind of a bit, and then it lands basically like in the realm of in a mediocre realm in the middle. Like it's very unfortunate, I feel. Though this episode, why I'm kind of positive, or very positive, very is maybe a bit exaggerated, but positive about this episode is because Galadriel works, in my opinion, much, much better in this episode than in all other episodes together. And that is good news, I think, because she, as a protagonist of the show, if the protagonist doesn't really work, it's a problem simply for the show and puts everything down just from a show perspective, ignoring all the Tolkien problems that might be there. But and that is good news. If we, for example, have like a strong Galadriel and her arc works, and we have then in parallel a strong, again, Elrond Durin part, then it is, my opinion, a recipe for a really good episode overall that we could get with 7 or 8 or something. So I'm kind of carefully optimistic in this regard. Though, of course, especially now we are all covering Tolkien in some form and have a deep love for the books, it's always the question, is it a good Tolkien adaptation? And I would still say probably not. And that is kind of the biggest, very unfortunate part. So for me personally, I always have to pick like, okay, I know there are people on the show that really dived into some details. For example, I mentioned it like 50 times by now, on the ship we see this little green twig on the front, which is the green bow of return, which is mentioned in Unfinished Tales. Fantastic. Like these are the details, and I'm, as a person, can I don't know, get kind of energy out of it and get excited about details like these still. So that always makes me kind of positive and maybe be a bit more forgiving when it comes to that, let's say, very strange lore decisions and changes. Like fans of Gil-galad have to be really, really strong these days, sadly. And I hope, maybe it's just bad influence, let's put it that way, or I don't know what, but
the green bow of return doesn't, and seeing like Dramber leg and stuff like that doesn't make up for Darth Gil-galad and his scheming, like machinations in Linden. I hear that, as an adaptation. Thematically, this episode, in some of the character scenes, did really hit on some deep issues and some themes that I think are core to Tolkien and that other adaptations haven't really touched on in the past. So far, I think this is probably my favorite episode. I will probably re-examine that at the end of the season and see whether that still holds true. But there's one scene in this episode that I just absolutely fanboyed over, and I loved it. And so I will have to say I did really like this episode. It wasn't perfect, but it for this show, within the context of this show, this was like my 9 out of 10 episode. So yeah, let's get into it and go scene by scene then. So I've already just brought up the first screenshot here, so I'm just going to shuffle you all over to the side. Conveniently, I've got Chris on the bottom there, so when I highlight a comment, it will just cover up his name and not his face, because we can't see his face. So so for all of you in the chat who are watching, we will try to keep up with all of you as much as possible if you've got comments or theories or anything you want to share. But it will primarily be like talking amongst ourselves and crisscrossing and talking about different themes and different things that we liked in the scenes. I always say this at the start, but the super chat function is available. So the feature is available for you to donate to the channel. And if you do so, your comment will come up in another box and we'll all see it. And we can highlight it on screen and talk about whatever you want to discuss within reason.
I'm finally useful. I like that.
So your voice is always useful. But
That's
having
true.
never seen what you look like, I said this to you last time I was on your channel, I think, or the time before. I have this like kind of mental image of you just being like a brain in a jar. So as I said, like comments will come up over the top of your screen there. So yeah, something to consider for those of you watching. It's a great way to support the channel and to support growing small creators. And so yeah, definitely here for that feature, and we'll keep our eye out for any super chats as we go through. So anyway, without further ado, we've got a lot to get through here. So let's talk about this first early scene. Adar he leaves the woods and he's got his boys there, his children, and he makes a little speech, and it's quite a good speech actually. I think it's a better speech than Bronwyn's from the previous episode in the tower, where she lost half of her followers. This was a more rousing speech. This episode did wonders for this character, because I think it made me empathize with him without liking him. He was still a villain, but he was a very understandable villain with kind of complex but grounded motivations, and I really, really liked a lot of the stuff with this character this week, and this actor is nailing it as well. So any thoughts on the opening scene?
I didn't really think that there was anything too outstanding about the scene, other than, like you said, the speech, and that seems to be kind of a routine almost in this, is that and I think I mentioned this in my review that I published yesterday. It's like the good guys don't know how to give a good speech in this show. I don't think I've heard one really good, rousing speech out of any of the good guys so far. And then Adar comes in and gives one speech, and it's like, I could get behind that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't particularly want to go burning and looting through human villages, but
right. But
if I was an orc, I would definitely follow this guy.
Right.
Well, and I think a lot of movies have a hard time with that rousing speech. A lot of times, I feel like they're not nailing it when they give these speeches, but Boromir's speech in the extended versions is what I think among movies and these rousing speech to the troops is the best. That's kind of my standard. What I compare everything against is Boromir's rousing speech to his troops.
Short and sweet, which leaves more time for drinking. Boromir the alcoholic. Yeah. Yeah, that was a good moment in the movies. Speaking of the movies, one of the things about this episode that really struck me was how many little movie Easter egg things there were.
Many.
There was tons, and it slightly took me out of this episode. It's one of my kind of criticisms. I have two big criticisms, and that's one of them of this episode. I say big criticisms; they didn't really ruin my enjoyment, but if there was 2 or 3 movie moments in here, then I'd nod along and be like, yeah, that's a nice little homage. But there were too many. There was like 12, and it felt a little bit like the director of this episode was not so much in this scene particularly, but the director of this episode, I think, was a big movie fanboy who maybe grew up with the movies, or they were that was a kind of a big moment in their development as a director, watching those movies, which is true for a lot of people in cinema, in showbiz. I think they're obviously very highly regarded, critically acclaimed movies, but it did feel a little bit fan servicey by the end of this episode,
especially because so many of them seemed so clunky in the way that they were done. It was just kind of obviously thrown in there as fan service and didn't really fit naturally every time.
No,
what I found interesting at the beginning scene was that Adar was also planting some seeds, and they later established this tradition. And previously, we also learned a bit about when Bronwyn talks to Arondir, we learn about this tradition. And before, Bronwyn also gifted some of these Alferine seeds to Arondir and so on. So it is kind of established. And even though, to my knowledge, that is never really mentioned in the books, that before battle, these seeds are buried for something new to grow. But I kind of like the idea. Like it feels fitting, in my opinion. And it's kind of cool that they have it in the show and also slowly build it up and reference it a few times again, so that it's not like a one-time thing, but it appears a few times. So I kind of enjoyed that.
Yeah, me too. It kind of gave some context to the conversation later on between Galadriel and Adar, where they're talking about the nature of the orcs, which is the scene I was referring to when I said earlier on, this has been my favorite scene of this show so far.
Definitely.
Because of the fact that he was planting these seeds, what it's telling the audience is that there's still a little bit of elf left in this guy. He's kind of a proto-orc, as we all kind of surmised, and it's revealed in this episode. But it seems to me that there's definitely some, I was going to say humanity, but that's the wrong word with respect to elves.
And I liked how he kind of hid behind the tree and did it. So,
almost in
the
secret.
other orcs, they wouldn't see that little still elf part of him.
Yeah, that little memory of what he was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of kept it to himself, almost as though he was ashamed of his origins in a way. But it nonetheless showed that there was still some kind of part of his original identity in there. Which speaks to the question of what is the nature of orcs? Do they have Fëa? And Josh, you're one who talks quite a lot about the metaphysics of Tolkien on your channel. And this is a complicated issue. I think we should get into it a little bit later on when we get to that scene. But I'll be very interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I'm like you. That's probably one of my favorite scenes out of the whole show so far. It's that or something with Elrond and Durin.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Agreed.
Yeah, there's a couple of moments in that conversation that I was just like, I was nodding along, like the inner Tolkien fan was nodding along, going, yeah, that's good. This is somebody who has read some Tolkien before. So yeah, very cool. And Waldreg is there. So we saw last time we saw him properly, he was stabbing Rowan, and we didn't see that happen. It happened off screen, but he was forced to make that sacrifice. And
which I was a little disappointed that they never went anywhere with him being stabbed by the Morgul blade, because it looked like he was getting that sickness. The kid, it looked like he was getting that, that same black veins that Frodo was getting after being stabbed by the Morgul blade, and then it was just nothing.
Mm-hmm. Well, we don't know if they'll reveal more about the blade in the future. Probably, I think we're done with that, and it was just a MacGuffin. So. But well, yeah, we'll have to see. But yeah, I know what you mean. It turned out to just be literally a key, as Arondir said. And one of the issues with the logic of this episode as well is like the orcs could have probably just blown up that dam. Like,
there were so many ways that could have been accomplished. What a MacGuffin.
There were also other rivers which they could have used. Nobody would have noticed. Like, if they built a trench through half of Mordor anyway, they could have also maybe, I don't know. The whole idea was very strange to me.
They could have gone to one of the less highly inhabited parts and, redirected one of the other rivers to the Sea of Nirn.
Yeah. It's really strange. Like, what I liked though, or what I realized now seeing this episode, that Waldreg killing Rowan was kind of needed to show that he's 100% devoted to Adar. That's why he later trusts the sword to him to do this trick, not a trick, to activate the keyhole, whatever you call it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's it made sense.
Yeah, that aspect kind of made sense. Character motivation wise, it did. Yeah, this guy's a coward, and we're supposed to hate him, and we certainly do. We do hate you.
Also, the actors sold it well. I feel.
Yeah. So they march on the tower. We saw this scene in the trailer. Waldreg is at Adar's side, and the army is behind them, and very, very defensible position. Leading up to that tower, because it's one narrow way and battlements and a keep. But nonetheless, our heroes decide to vacate the tower and ambush them. And we get this kind of nearly amusing sort of like kind of Home Alone sort of style. It's kind of crap kind of laid for the orcs. And but it was cool though. I think it was cool overall. I mean, I was nearly laughing at the kind of like booby trap sort of element of it, but Arondir's actor, I think, did sell the kind of physical side of this scene, and it did work for me at least. But the logic of it, I'm not so sure of, because we get this nice action scene, and Adar's kind of holding Waldreg in place, which I quite enjoyed. This was probably the first Peter Jackson trilogy moment, actually, because this reminded me of the scene where the orc with the kind of what's his name?
Pizza dough. Gothmog with the pizza dough face.
Yeah, Gothmog with the dodgy eye thing, the kind of weird growth on his face in the movies, does the similar sort of thing where the ballista is throwing the not ballista, but the catapult is throwing the big piece of rock at him, and he just sort of like dodges it by stepping backwards. This is kind of, I felt like this was a little bit of an allusion to that scene, although this was less comical.
I think my main takeaway on this one was just like you said, they abandoned the really defensible position, which is a bad idea in almost every circumstance. And then, their tactic is a nice idea, but it really isn't worth the tactic unless you're sure the tactic is going to take out virtually all of the enemy. And that's obviously not their plan, because they're expecting to fall back to the village, which is not defensible. So it leads you to wonder, what exactly is the purpose of this Rube Goldberg machine that they've set up? Well, it's going to take out a few orcs maybe and halt their progress, but they're still going to come get you. So why did we do that exactly?
And it took out like 12 orcs.
I'm not even sure it was that many, but
yeah. And
we couldn't tell, but yeah, it certainly didn't take out very many because there was still a large force that marched on that village, and yeah, it's totally exposed to the village.
It'd be one thing if they were doing it to get away, to give them longer to be on the road to get away from them, but just to go to the village that's a couple 100 yards away.
But even in terms of getting away, like I've been saying in my reviews for 2 or 3 episodes in a row now, like, why don't they just leave Ostirith and go somewhere else? They've had all this time. They could have just left. Nope.
Yeah, it's I completely agree. Like I kind of like that in the last episode they hinted at that the tower might be not stable. I think the Bronwyn says to Arondir, they will get here and this tower will fall. And then, she pauses, looks up the tower, and we see some dust and stone crumbling down. I thought, okay, that was a nice introduction to this being a bit unstable and so on. But as Timbo said, it maybe killed at most 12 orcs. And I guess the one with the big belly button was killed. So maybe he was the most dangerous of the bunch. But I don't know. It felt really strange. And then, as Ori said, like, why don't they just leave this place? Like, the same question appears. The orcs can't move during day. In an ideal scenario, daytime is a bit longer than nighttime, so they should have a huge advantage here. They could just keep moving, find the elves. Arondir should know where to find help. There's so many possibilities what they could do, and then they decide to stay in the village. Okay, that is right next to that. Like, okay, maybe get to another village that's a bit further away, so the orcs need longer, they have more preparation time or whatever. Like, this makes so little sense for me as well. Like,
or even just go somewhere where they're not going to expect to find you. I mean,
exactly.
There's so many directions you could go from there. I mean, why choose the one place that they're going to look?
Really, and now you're going to have for years to come Southlanders that are like, bringing down the tower was an inside job, and other ones will be like, it wasn't. It was the orcs. They'll be labeled conspiracy theorists and
Mordor truthers.
Yes.
It was an inside job in a sense. Yeah, they were right. Yeah, so and the logic of them just sort of, I didn't really get how they managed to get from the tower to beneath the tower. Presumably there was another way out, but we didn't see that. So it kind of felt a bit, when it happened, it felt a bit like strange that they managed to just kind of sneak past all of the orcs like that. But and the orcs, we know that Morgoth built that tower, or that Sauron built it for him in ages past. So it didn't quite feel right, but it didn't ruin my enjoyment of the scene necessarily. But it just, I had a split second of like, I'm not sure how that happened, but okay, let's move on.
Yeah, it really felt like they teleported or something. That was strange.
Well, I mean, this show is full of that, so
really.
What's one more?
And it felt like the stake was, okay, we are now trapped here. We can't go anywhere. That was like the kind of payoff of this situation. And then, no, we can just leave here and go to this valley next there. No problem at all. Like, okay. It's just... Not even Adar seemed to know that this was possible, because else he would have maybe put some orcs there. But it's just, wow. But yeah, let's move on. Sorry.
So we move on to the Númenóreans, I think. We get a scene with them. We see the ships. It's nighttime. I'm assuming this isn't happening concurrent with the battle, because that wouldn't make sense. The editing sort of made it seem as if it was, but they say that they've still got a day's sail, and then once they make landfall, they've still got a day's sail, and then they've got a day's ride. So presumably this is happening not at the same time, which is fine, I guess.
My theory on that, it's like the movie Interstellar, where when they go down, time is working differently when you're in Middle Earth than when you're not. So it's something to do with Einstein's theory of relativity or something. I don't know.
Let's not make our brains hurt.
So we were seen with Isildur and Galadriel. And so first of all, he's saying to his horse, and there was a scene there which I didn't get a screenshot of it, sadly, but he takes a bite from his apple, and then he offers the apple to his horse, Beric, and then he takes another bite from the apple, and I just went, ooh, saying that. I mean, I don't know, some country people, maybe that's what they do, but that's not how I roll, and I was like, oh no.
Yeah, I would not.
Some people I know were cringing at the gory eye scene later on, and that was this scene for me. That
like, yeah. Well, and the thing that my wife mentioned, which I mentioned in my review, is not even so much just that; it's the fact that he then throws away half of a perfectly good apple.
Yes.
Yeah.
What? Why? Why?
Yeah, that
Which
really,
you do not do.
No.
On a ship. You can only bring as much food as you can bring. You don't waste it.
That's right. But he does have a nice conversation with Galadriel right after, so at least that kind of helped it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I liked that conversation.
I also really liked with the apple that he bites in the apple for the horse. He turns the apple around so the horse has not to bite in his bite, and then he just bites in it again and doesn't care. I found it kind of funny, I have to admit.
I didn't even notice that detail, but that makes it even worse.
The sea is always right, and it also needs vitamin D. So
that's true.
Well, vitamin C, maybe. But yeah, this conversation with Galadriel, I did enjoy. I thought this was a good scene. One of the character moments of the whole episode that worked pretty well.
And Galadriel actually said something intelligent instead of just being rage-hating vengeance seeker.
Yeah, that's true.
But in the deleted scenes, we'll see she threatened to murder him.
But yeah, I feel
we learned a little bit. We learned a little bit about Isildur and Elendil's deceased wife in this scene, which is good exposition, which felt natural, and kind of we learned a little bit about these characters. So nice moment. Galadriel, I think, felt more elvish here as well. With I've already been able to see land for almost an hour. It was a nice touch.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. Really was. I really also liked the scene. It felt more natural. Isildur says, "Keen are the eyes of the elves," which is like a book quote from Lord of the Rings. I think was said to Legolas by Aragorn, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool moment. The exposition worked well, and now, like, I feel after episode 5, which besides the lore, I think the lore stuff was just from a show perspective, a show that helped Galadriel quite a bit, which I liked on episode 5, and it felt like she did like a little character development. Then she felt more plausible after that, and I feel we see the result of this now here in this dialogue where it's more fleshed out, and suddenly, as you said, she's not like threatening to kill everyone. Just is now saying something smart, and she looks forward. She is like, you feel like also she is really looking forward to finally meeting the enemy and do what she always wanted to do, like going for revenge and maybe prove to the world that she was always right from the beginning and so on. So I felt like the whole scene and atmosphere captured that really well. Also the dialogue, of course. And of course, Isildur was, my opinion, also a character that always was a bit underdeveloped, if that makes sense. Like, he did some stuff that was questionable, like ruined his life and the life of his friends, and you didn't really know what are his doubts, what is going on with this character, why does he not want to just finish his sea trial, and I don't know, then he can, I don't know, leave the sea guard anyway or whatever. It felt a bit
his character was really, basically a cliche.
Yeah, exactly. Really a cliche, and it didn't make much sense. Now, with this episode, I feel like, okay, now they could develop him a bit better, and suddenly he starts, at least distantly, to make more sense, and dialogue work better. So that helped Isildur, I think, a lot in this episode.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Galadriel, like it showed, she felt she should be like, the most intelligent character. Everybody should be looking to her for wisdom. She's one of the oldest ones there, and I don't think they've gotten there with that. And I want her to be the leader, both in battle and in strategy and in that.
Okay, let's move on. Elendil pops his head in, and he's talking about how he has never seen the sun rise from over the land like this, and so on and so forth. And Timbo, you're you're sighing.
Yeah.
And then he kind of like changes the subject and then walks off like, oh, she drowned.
Yeah. Well, one of the things they seem to do a lot in this episode was ask a question and completely ignore it several times. But
just this episode?
I guess it really
maybe more so than usual.
Yeah. But the point that I was really sighing about was never seeing the sunrise, over the land. And he's on Numenor, which is an island. I was stationed in Pearl Harbor. And when you're on the east side of the island, the sun rises over the sea. But when you sail to the west side of the island, the sun rises over the island, over the land. So it kind of was like, you never went around to the other side of the island.
Well, we get implications that they came from the west side of the island. It's not really clear, but you get the idea that that's where they're from, and that maybe why Isildur wants to go back. And again, it's not really ever explained, so I don't know that, but that's the impression that I've gotten, which is what makes it even weirder.
Yeah, but it just, for me, that just being a sailor who was on an island, I was just like, oh, come on. But I knew the point they were trying to make, that they were getting closer to Middle Earth and that. So, I forgave them for that, but it was kind of a weird thing to say. So basically the west side of Numenor is completely unprotected. No patrols over there.
Well, Numenor is a star-shaped island. It has 5 promontories, Tolkien called them, and you don't even need to actually go to the western one in order to, I think the implication is that they abandoned Andunier, where Elendil's family are from. His father was the last Lord of Andunier, as I'm sure probably most of the people watching have heard this. I've made a video on it before. But I mean, you don't even need to sail up to that specific point to, have land on your.
I may have to deal with a malfunctioning light here.
Yeah, take a moment if you need to.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's changing the subject. What I did like about it is the fact that he does change the subject, kind of like tells us that he's not dealt with his wife's death, and so that was a character moment that sort of like informed us a little bit about him, which is fine. So yeah, not too much more to say about that. So we cut to the village, and Arondir is trying to destroy the sword, and surprise, surprise, he can't destroy it with a, meager kind of primitive Bronze Age.
Cannot be destroyed,
blacksmithing
son
tool.
of Glóin, with any craft that we here possess.
Exactly.
Movie moment.
Yeah,
but it feels like a scene, in my opinion, that was needed to be in the show. Like, they need to show, okay, can we just simply destroy this thing? No. And for that, I felt like, okay, at least they try to do this little exposition detail here.
Yeah, I think if they hadn't had
this
scene, if they hadn't had this scene, then like probably somebody would be complaining about the fact that nobody tried to destroy the sword, and that's
we would.
Yeah, that's not wrong. So
100%.
That'd be us.
It's totally fair. So yeah, is what it is. Bronwyn comes over. They have a conversation. They have a tender moment, and then we move to Arondir's speech. which was very kind of matter-of-fact kind of speech, I felt. Not a whole lot of charisma to it, but
I don't
did
even
the job.
remember it. That's how little impression it made on me.
Yeah. It was more of a tactical briefing than a kind of like rousing speech, if anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have one of my issues with like MCs is I hate the phrase, I can't hear you. And they try and get the crowd to give a bigger response. And I'm like, a good MC will get the crowd going just with their energy and presence. And when he's trying to get the crowd going and then he says it and then he has to prompt them to give it more energy, you know, and that might be a little nitpicky. I mean, they're all probably pretty freaked out at that point, but again, every one of these speeches, and it doesn't matter, it's not just this show, it's any military show, Star Wars, anything. Anytime they give a speech, I'm always like, would I follow that guy? Would I not follow that guy? Would I be excited about following that guy? Would I be a little worried? So
Yeah.
Yeah, they're difficult scenes to write, these sorts of scenes, I think, because we've all seen scenes like this so many times in TV and movies, and it's difficult to do something different.
What I wondered is where did they get the orc heads from? Like, there was one orc killed, I think, in the village, right? By
That's what I was
Arondi.
going to say. Is that, or is that? Surely that's not the same one that Bronwyn killed in episode. What was it? 3.
Yeah, that looked 2, I think. That looked different. He was one of the I call them the tunnel digging orcs,
right?
With these claws.
Maybe a reindeer brought it back from the castle with him.
Yeah, maybe. Would be strange, I guess, but
Yeah.
I brought a gift to you.
I brought you a present.
Maybe this is just an outside chance, but maybe the orcs actually killed one of their own, because that does happen with orcs.
Yeah, of course, could be
Possibility.
Yeah.
I don't know. More speech shots. Bronwyn and Arondir finally kiss and have a nice, tender, romantic moment. Are we buying their romance at the moment?
I've mentioned this before in my reviews. I'm still kind of on the fence as far as the acting skills of mainly Arondir, but also kind of Bronwyn. I don't think either of them really convey a chemistry very well. And so, like, do I believe it in terms of is the plot telling me they're having a romance? Yes. Do I think that they're really passionately in love with each other? If I was just to see them walking along on the street, I mean, it's not the most convincing thing ever, but like I said, the plot is telling me that is what's going on. So in that sense, I buy it.
And I like the idea here much more than Galadriel and Halbrand. You know,
Me
with
too,
them,
and
yeah,
that's for Tolkien lore reasons, if anything.
Yeah, exactly. So, and these are two, you know, characters made up for the show. I have no problem with that. He's forward deployed. She's like the only, you know, young lady in the village.
Eligible bachelorette.
Yeah. So he's been deployed for 79 years. You know, something's, you know, going to happen.
You've been in the armed services, so you can probably relate a little, I suppose. I don't know. I don't want to get too personal on stream. So, but yeah. So here we've got the orcs marching on their position. Their torches appear, and there seems to be hundreds of them. Possibly they're doing something here to make it seem as if there are more of them. They're certainly all carrying a torch just to be intimidating. This is a tactic, which is kind of cool, I guess. It helps in a nighttime battle scene as well if you can actually see things. So it's cool. Shades of the Long Night episode in Game of Thrones, though. But
although, to counter the point about seeing in the night, orcs are supposed to be good at seeing in the dark. Humans, not so much. Do you really want to give up that advantage? Of course, we find out later in the episode.
Yeah,
that logic doesn't necessarily apply.
Yeah, they have another plan, and they hatch another ambush, which comes off very well. The humans certainly underestimate them. Yeah, not too much more to say about that, but very intimidating march. And they're shouting. What are they shouting? Numpart or something. Which
Yeah.
I think somebody translated as death.
Yeah, I
the,
think it means kill or death or something.
Yeah.
There's in the Amazon, like, has this what is it called? X-ray thing, where you get a little information box there when you watch it, and there it says Numpart means death.
Right.
Oddly enough, it's what the Ewoks chanted as well.
That's quite funny.
Bronwyn can't strike a match. I was trying for about 10 minutes to get a good screenshot of her trying to strike a match where you could actually see what she's doing, because it goes by very quickly. But yeah, she it's funny. She can't strike a match, but she can take out an orc with a sickle. So
yeah, because the orc kind of lets her do it. I was not impressed with that scene.
Yeah, the orc takes out the other villager really quickly, and then Bronwyn's
and then
like,
just kind of sits there.
Yeah,
was a bit unfortunate.
He was stabbed in the foot.
That is true.
Yeah, but she's got some skills actually with that thing. Despite it possibly being a little bit clumsy, like choreography wise, like we're clearly supposed to think that she can wield that thing.
Which is kind of weird for a healer, but
yeah.
who knows what she does in her spare time, I guess.
She does autopsies too.
So improvised weapon, and she critical hits with the orc, and I got 2 screenshots of that for some reason. That one's a little better, so we'll stick with that one. And then
look, the orc brought a torch, so
the
problem
orc
solved.
conveniently brought a torch, and well, they all had torches,
right?
But yeah, the orc provides the means of his brother's destruction, and I did actually really quite like the funny scene where one of the orcs is like, "Ha, the fools missed us," and then the other one just comes sliding into the side of him. It was kind of funny.
Yeah, I have to agree.
It's so cliche, though.
It really is.
It is funny, but man, you can't. It just seems so. It's like some of the moments with Gimli or some of the other characters in the Peter Jackson movies where they just do a hammy comic thing, and it's just like, did you really have to sink to that? But I mean, it could have been worse.
Now people love those movies though, and they won untold Oscars. So
yeah,
it is what it is. I liked the scene. I thought it was funny. It wasn't too slapstick either. It was just kind of like,
no. Like I said, it could have been worse. It definitely could have been worse.
Yeah. Somebody else is saying Home Alone in the chat. I said that at the beginning. There was a kind of element of that, like repeated booby traps going off. I was like seeing Joe Pesci in my mind as an orc, which would have been quite a good casting.
That's true.
He was the orc with the gold tooth.
But it kind of made sense in this part that it seems that the orcs were kind of trapped between the 2 fire trails. Those things kind of activated or whatever, however that worked. So the villagers or the archers could see them, and they were kind of, for at least a time, put or hold into a certain position. So I felt like that kind of made sense.
Yeah, tactically, it was actually pretty smart. It would have still been smarter to stay in the castle, but
that's true.
Yeah, I think probably so. Yeah, they wouldn't have probably lasted very long in the castle either if the Númenóreans hadn't have arrived. But at least you've got a bottleneck there. You've got a bridge. It's the only way up there, and you've got fortifications. But yeah, whatever. That's the scene we're talking about. They managed to kind of kettle them into that one area with the flames. Carefully laid trap. Arondir, I really like the way he handles his bow and arrow, actually. Although he is kind of like tilting it to the side a bit, like kind of like gangsters in gangster films with their guns to the side. But,
yeah, the thing that I always find uncomfortable watching him do it, though, is the fact that he has that inside the string grip with his back hand. And every time I see that, I'm like, oh, my shoulder hurts. Just like, this is so much more natural. Why not just do it this way? But, maybe it's more comfortable for some people.
I like that comment.
Yeah, me too. Very good. So more fight scenes. This is another Peter Jackson moment for me, because the orcs are chanting. They're chanting as they're taking the battering ram up, which is fine. It's logical, like whatever. But I think it's definitely like yet another kind of slight influence of the Peter Jackson movies on this whole episode. I suppose we should take a moment just to kind of acknowledge how influential those movies are and how that's maybe a little bit inevitable in some scenes. But yeah, it's impossible not to think of Grand as these orcs are doing this. Go on, Timbo.
I was just going to say, with any kind of medieval battle movies, this type of shot happens. In Braveheart, I can't remember which castle at Edinburgh or whatever it is. They bring the battering ram up and that. So I saw it as a bit of a callback, but it wasn't quite, as too fan servicey as some of them were, I thought.
Yeah, it's not so hyper specific that you could only tie it to Peter Jackson.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on something on the chat here from Emil, who says, I looked up Udun just now. Interesting lore. Yeah, I wanted to actually talk about this. So this was the name of the episode, was Udun, which is the area immediately around Mount Doom where they more or less are. But it's a Sindarin name. The Quenya form is Utumno, which is quite an interesting kind of fact to note when we think about this whole episode, because that was Morgoth's original fortress, or Melkor as he was at that point in the timeline. And so that was where he was originally set up in the very early period, which was basically the Battle of the Powers, in the kind of the dawn of time before the elves even awoke. That was where he was pulled up, which some have speculated that fortress, that fallback point in the north that we see in the first episode with Galadriel and her squad of rebellious scouts that head up there into the Forodwaith, that fortress could have been Utumno, which is something that I thought about at the time and beforehand. And so we see that fortress again in a flashback in this episode, which I kind of feel like it might be a little bit of a subtle confirmation that that's what that was. It could be like a sort of double entendre to the episode title, which is kind of fun. Any thoughts on the title from a linguistic or a lore perspective from anybody?
Well,
sorry.
Go ahead, Chris.
I looked also again and tried to find a bit about the etymology, if there's more to it. Unfortunately, not only in the index of the Lord of the Rings book. I'm not sure if Tolkien wrote this or if he let write the index, but there it is mentioned as translate to underworld or hell even. And considering how basically before Door is transformed into Mordor at the end of the episode, so it basically becomes this hellish place. And I felt like that was kind of fitting, I feel, in that aspect. Also, of course, in Mordor, there is a region that is called Udun, close to the Black Gate. And that I found, I don't know, quite fitting title for this episode. I think I also used it a bit in my review where I said, and now it is turned to Udun, to hell, something like that. So felt it kind of fitting. As you already said, the reference that we see this old outpost of Sauron probably also is like a slight confirmation that this might be it. Yeah,
it's not necessarily implied, but I kind of took it that way just because that's my headcanon at this point anyway.
Same.
So it's fine. But yeah, it's quite a nice title. The geography doesn't quite line up. I said that's roughly where they are, but yeah, you're right. It's like the valley further north, isn't it? But...
Yeah, and one of the things that I found interesting, I want to say this was on Twitter. I saw somebody did like a really close zoomed in shot of the map that they're using in the show, and it actually shows that where Ostirith and Hordern and all these other villages are is actually like closer to where Minas Ithil / Minas Morgul will be later on. And so they're not really in the area that will become Udun.
Yeah, no.
Which leads you to think that they are using it maybe in the kind of sense that Chris is talking about, where Mordor just becomes kind of a hellish place. Although I don't really think that's Tolkien's intent with the term. I think when he's thinking of Udun as being hell, he means it more in the sense of closer to what Chris said, meaning the underworld, or even something more generic like the pit or the abyss, because that's going back to the etymology of the word hell is from the, I think, Norse goddess Hela, who is kind of the queen of the underworld in that mythology, if I'm remembering right. And it's it's really more about, it's more like the idea of a pit or a place that you just keep dead people, or in this case, in the case of Utumno, or even the pits of Angband in the First Age, that's hell to elves, because it's just a place where you go, you're trapped, you never get out. So it's not like the Christian idea of a hell of eternal fire where you burn. It's more the idea of just a pit that you get thrown into and never get out of again. So I don't think that's really necessarily what Tolkien was going for, but it seems like they're more leaning into that as the interpretation for the show, because you can't line it up with the geography, because geographically where they're at does not line up with where Udun is in the map of Mordor at all.
Agreed. It's kind of interesting because I don't get it together, because I looked, I know, ages ago a bit into the etymology or like in the Bible, the term hell is also not classically used. There are like two terms for it, if I remember correctly, and
Hades.
And it's like some Hebrew stuff, but I forgot what it was exactly. So it's
Sheol is a term for the grave that often gets translated hell.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I meant. So it's a complicated term in of itself, and I feel, as Josh just said, that you should consider this more like in a mythological sense here. The term hell, like it's like the underworld, as we know it, some terrible places that we know from, I don't know, Northern mythology or something like this. Closer to that than to that Christian idea of hell.
Yeah. Okay. Let's carry on, move on to more action. This is the kind of tumble that he takes off of the roof here, and takes out a couple of orcs here. Except we find out later on that they may not be orcs, all of them. But then we get this comical scene where he like backs up and then bangs into this guy, and I laughed when I took this screenshot earlier because it just looks hilarious when you take it as a still. I was thinking about making this my thumbnail, but I didn't have time to change it.
That would have been a good one.
It would have.
And quite apart from this being just another example of comedy that really is a little bit out of place, in my opinion, it's also just really bad fighting strategy on the part of the orc. Like, if a guy is backing up to you, you don't wait for him to comically back into you and then look around and see you. You just kill him from behind and move on. Like, why are you waiting?
Yeah, that's true. I also laughed there. So I feel, though, I have to admit, to be fair to the show, that I expected more comical. I
saw that comment too.
Yeah, I also saw the comment.
There's more chemistry between these two than with Bronwyn, maybe.
That is true. But yeah, I feel like the comedic elements in the show are relatively rare, so I don't mind if they appear here and there. Like I've seen other films and stuff these days that are basically, they can't walk 2 meters without like a little joke here and there. I feel like the show takes it back quite a bit, which I find pleasant and so I can kind of live with that. But
it's a step back from the slapstickness of the Hobbit movies.
Yeah,
I would say,
for sure.
which is a step in the right direction, honestly.
With this, I wasn't really bothered by that, and yeah, he probably should have just stabbed him and been on with it. But the big orc like that, he's got that David and Goliath kind of complex, that Goliath.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I'm so awesome, I'll just come in and expose myself and still smash him. And it doesn't work.
Yeah, well, we see what that gets him in the end.
All right, we've been going for just over an hour. I'm going to just shut off the screenshots for just a moment and just do a quick little mid-roll. So I'd just like to sort of talk to my guests a little bit halfway through and give you a chance to promote whatever you're working on. Mods, if you're paying attention, if you can put anything that you can for like the channel links and whatnot in the chat as well. All of these gentlemen's links are in the description below, or most of them. Certainly everything I've been able to find for your various socials and of course your YouTube channels. But let's just go around clockwise once again and just let people know where they can find you and what you're working on and what you've got coming up. So Timbo, first of all.
Well, for those of you that don't know me, Timbo Took is my channel, and I blend Bob Ross with Tolkien, and I paint episodes of The Joy of Painting Middle-earth, where in usually about 45 minutes, I'll go from start to finish, and you can see some of the paintings behind me, and just go through, and it's done as a tutorial, but it's just kind of have fun with it and talk about the story and the whatever scene it is. Normally I try and paint per the description of the scene from the books. Every now and then, I love the movies too, so I'll paint from the movies, but typically with my character, Timbo Took, who's a hobbit, who's the grandson of Peregrine Took and Samwise Gamgee, the grandson. So if I'm painting from the book, I'll say it's from Samwise's stories, and if I'm painting from the movies, I say Pippin got drunk and this was his story. And as well with the series, when I paint from Rings of Power, I say it's Barleyman Butterbur's telling of the Second Age. We're just gathering at the Prancing Pony and listening to him tell the story, and he forgets things and makes things up. But we can always go to the books on our shelves and see the real thing. So that's what I'm doing.
Awesome. Definitely recommended viewing. Excellent person as well, and somebody who I'm proud to call a friend. So definitely check out everything he does on his channel. Tolkien Lore.
Yeah, so it's the Tolkien Lore channel, or I think that I changed the actual link to Tolkien Lore podcast because I started uploading the audio as podcast. So you can find me on most podcatchers, the YouTube, and I'm on alternate video platforms as well. I also, my Twitter for fun on Tuesdays through Friday, I'll drop a trivia question related to Tolkien, not always Middle-earth related. The Twitter is JRRT Lore, at JRRT Lore. So, it can be anything from super easy to super hard to, Middle-earth to his life, his letters, any of that stuff. So, I mean, the trivia questions have a pretty broad range. So, yeah, but I mean, on my channel, I mostly focus on Lord of the Rings type stuff, but even there I'll go, like, it's the Tolkien Lore channel for a reason, because I'll talk about things beyond Middle-earth, because Tolkien, as I've read over, the years, I've just gotten more interested in him as a person beyond just the stories. So other stories he wrote, his life, his letters. I'm going to be doing sometime in the nearish future a video on his letter in which he advises, I think it's Michael, on the subject of romance and the whole concept of the soulmate, because it's a really fascinating letter, and I think it's got some really good advice that people probably ought to hear these days. So that'll be coming out hopefully within the next month or so. I've got some other videos already lined up, but that's the kind of stuff I do is very broad ranging on the channel.
Wonderful deep dives. I'm in awe of the fact that you can keep talking to a camera for as long as you can and just like have a conversation with yourself, with your viewers. I've tried to do videos like that and I'm just not natural at it. So yeah, very, very cool content and some really interesting takes on Tolkien's metaphysics and yeah, like you say, just his life and who he was and what his views were and all kinds of like minutiae of Tolkien and sort of deep dives on lots of things. Wonderful channel and another excellent person as well. And finally, my friend Chris from the Philosophers Games. What are you doing content on the show at the moment? What have we got coming up in the next days and weeks?
Yeah, just relatively early today, late in the night for me. I just got my review done for episode 6 already. So if you haven't seen that, maybe check that out. Currently, I'm streaming quite a lot. Just also had a stream before I went on here, and I already see some people from my chat here in your chat. So I gave you a shout out and nice to see some people followed it. So that's pretty awesome. So I also do like usually relatively deep dives and stuff. My focus is often a bit more on language stuff, for example. So I try to read what is written on Arondir's ring or something like that and try to make any sense out of that, which is often kind of interesting. And also currently building up a bit my knowledge on when Tolkien wrote what element in his history, if that makes sense. And for example, I started I do like very long videos often that go like in a lot of detail into stuff. And my last project was Elrond, which is almost completed after 7-8 hours and of scripted content, I should say. And then my next project will be Galadriel, and I have 30 minutes about her already, and we have not even the first kinslaying, so we just talked about hair and all the fundamental problem of Tolkien placing her into the lore, and because she's a late character that was written much later. So stuff like this always interests me, and we go in quite a bit of detail into this. And if you like this, check me out. The Philosopher's Games is my YouTube channel. Also, you can maybe find it on tphgames.com if that is easier to type. And yeah, I don't know. Also, I have a Twitter, though there's mostly I have a new video and maybe some hot takes here and there, but they're pretty rare. And yeah, I don't know. If you like video games, I also have a game-related channel, but currently I'm so busy covering the show that I have not time making any content for that. And on top of that, I'm also from Germany, so I recently started also a German channel, which is also a bit difficult to fill with content. So if you're from Germany, maybe check that out as well. It's TPH Law, but you find the link probably if you go to my main channel and check on channels or something like that. But
wait, you're German?
Yeah. You probably don't hear it because my English is almost perfect. No, just kidding. But yeah, it's often people say, "Oh, you're from Germany," when I just start opening my mouth. So that is definitely noticeable. Yeah. So a lot of stuff working currently, but it's just covering the show, going into it, having long streams, going frame by frame, stuff like that. So yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to waste too much more time on myself, but I've got videos coming on the Harfoots and on Gil-galad, and I'll still be streaming weekly for the next 2 weeks.
So basically, you're going to be doing things that we hate about the show.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm trying to like kind of inform people on the stuff that is actually written in the books. So
they don't hate it as much.
So people know the real story, and I'm
Right.
correcting Barnum and Butter's horrible like fables, basically. That's what I'm doing. That's been my philosophy the last couple of weeks. Yeah, so yeah, definitely look for that. I'm working on a long video, long by my standards, not by Chris's, on Tom Bombadil. So I'm going to try and make that the best video on Tom Bombadil on YouTube, because I've always felt, even before I started a channel myself, that doing a video on Tom was like a rite of passage for a Tolkien lore YouTuber. And so I've gone into quite a bit of depth on that video, and so that'll be coming out sometime after the show. And also, I'm hoping to have a kind of a new line of content coming out soon, which I'm hopefully going to be filming the first episode of next week with a group where I'm going to be playing through the One Ring RPG. So I'm going to be playing the starter set adventures. I'll be the game master. I have a wonderful team of players who have agreed to take their time to do it. So we'll get to that shortly. But yeah, without further ado, I think we should get back to the episode because we've wasted enough time and we've still got a lot to get through here. So yeah.
Can I maybe add one little thing?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Also, I have a roundtable where I invite, basically this stream where I invite other streamers and we discuss the current episode. That's also going on. It's usually Thursday or Wednesday, just in case people are curious. Dan was already a guest here. Tim as well. Josh, I couldn't get, sadly, due to scheduling issues yet, but we maybe figure something out there.
Yeah. Cool. So I think we're going to skip past the rest of this fight, more or less. I've got lots of screenshots of it, but I just want to get to this last end point of this fight here and talk about some gore. Because some people have had some strong opinions on this scene and the gory nature of it, and whether or not this is family friendly, whether it's appropriate, etc. And also the dramatic element of it. Does it go on for too long? I didn't hate
it definitely goes on too long. I think
slightly too long. Yeah, but it's not an awful scene by any means.
Yeah, on the topic of family friendliness, this one of the comments that my wife made to me about this is the first time that she was like, yeah, I'm definitely not comfortable with our oldest child watching this. And, up to this point, she's been basically okay. And our oldest is not that old. Like, I'm not going to give the exact age, but younger than 10. So, up to this point, it's been pretty family friendly. And this was one of the points that she was kind of disappointed in, because it's like, I definitely can't let him watch it. I wasn't going to let him watch it anyway, because I don't want him to be corrupted by this before he actually reads the good stuff. But, quite apart from that, she has a point. I don't really want him watching that scene, regardless, at his age.
From my point of view, I don't need this show to be completely family friendly because I don't have a family. And so I'm not really thinking in those terms necessarily, but I wasn't sure whether this shot went on for a long time. We panned from the orc to Arondir for quite a long time, and he was having that struggle where he was trying to stab him with the whatever it was, the splinter that went in his eye. He was trying to stab Arondir's eye. An eye for an eye, right?
Yeah.
It makes the whole world blind. And so this went on for a bit too long for it to feel credible as a piece of choreography, but it just...
Yeah, my wife actually got so heebie-jeebied about it that she didn't even finish watching it. She turned away for 30 seconds and came back and didn't know how the fight ended, because she was just like, she couldn't deal with it. So
yeah, well, I think if you'd have paused it there and asked her to look away and just say, how do you think this is going to end, she could have probably guessed.
Yeah.
So yeah, Bronwyn comes to the rescue and stabs the orc.
It's kind of interesting in this context. Germany has a very strict, not strict, but I think every country in the world has some, when it comes to age rating, certain things, they are more important to them. For example, in Germany, violence usually gets your age rating relatively high up, relatively fast. So that got a lot more lax in the in the past. Like, for example, the United States, there, for example, maybe nudity gets the age rating higher much faster, where in Germany that is usually far less an issue. And here I was really surprised. Like in Germany, it's the Amazon internal rating is 12 years or so. I thought, okay, that's in my opinion a bit tough for 12-year-olds. I feel the ice scene, that was a bit over that. Like, I didn't mind it personally, but I thought, if I don't sure if I would want to watch it as a 12-year-old or so. But I guess there's some 12-year-olds who kind of like to, what you call it, explore your limits, what you when it comes to violence. but in cinema and so on. But yeah, I don't know. It definitely can understand that there's some discussion about this, and I'm not sure. Maybe you notice that this is a different director who directed this episode than the previous ones. So maybe it's just her style. I think it's a French-Swedish director, Charlotte Brännström, I think is her name. And not sure if I pronounce this correct, but yeah, it's I found it was noticeable. I think Swedish, like what do you call it, like crime films and so on, also known for a bit more violent, if that makes sense. Not sure though. Maybe somebody in chat knows.
I didn't find this, icky or anything like that. I didn't have a moment like that with the scene at all. It was a step up in violence from what we've seen before.
Yeah.
Up until now, the most violent scene, most gory scene was probably Halbrand breaking somebody's arm. It was like that actually made that, because I felt that bone snap when I watched that scene. So maybe that one was even more like of a kind of. I had a more visceral reaction to that than this, because this felt kind of like, well, that's just black kind of goo they've made. It's not real blood. Like I didn't have a reaction to it. Go on, Tim.
I was just gonna say, to me, like when the blood is gushing out of his eye, it looked the CGI looked very CGI fake-ish, but then it's practical when it's hitting his face. So that kind of swap there was a little weird. As far as the violence goes, I don't think it's necessary to be this gory with a Tolkien property. I can see it in Game of Thrones. That's what it's known for. It was kind of like, what's their motivation? Is their motivation just because they felt this is what was needed, or was it we're trying to compete with Game of Thrones, so we need to throw this kind of in there? I didn't necessarily think it was, the Harfoot ankle. Yes, thank you.
The difference there is that's not exactly violence, but I get the point. Yeah, I mean, that was
unpleasant.
Just a little gruesome. It just, but my kids are, mostly teenagers now, if not adults. I have a couple adults, but, if they were a little younger, would I want them watching that scene? No, I wouldn't. So it kind of, I feel when you do stuff like that, it kind of takes away that opportunity to enjoy a story like that with your children. Now I know
I was Chris mentioned, some young kids, some 12-year-olds want to test their limits and watch gory movies. I was such a 12-year-old, and I think I turned out all right. So,
well, and I grew up in the 80s. My parents took me to Poltergeist in the theater. That was even before PG-13s. So, so I think I was, I don't know, maybe 8 years old at the time, and the guy's ripping his face off. So, I'm not necessarily like, oh, we can't see that, we'll turn out bad, but
yeah, it's kind of interesting. Somebody in my Discord said something like he's also was a bit older when the Peter Jackson films already came out, and when he heard that he makes the Lord of the Rings films and he did like Brain Dead, he felt like this would exactly how his Lord of the Rings film would look when it comes to violence, after knowing Peter Jackson's doing the Lord of the Rings films. So I found it kind of funny.
Well, Peter Jackson did definitely bring some of the horror elements in from his background into those movies, but they weren't as gory as, for the most part, as this. I think probably the goriest thing was like the heads that got sent over the walls of Minas Tirith was maybe like the most kind of gory scene I can remember. Anyway, let's move on. Not much to talk about here. So the orcs have done a fake out, and they've kind of sent in the men first from the village who came in with Waldreg's group and the traitors, and so they've gone in orc armor, and it's taken Arondir and the others, this culture, realize that they've been killing their own people, and they're kind of horrified by it. Which I'm slightly in two minds about, because on the one hand, they're traitors and they've kind of sworn allegiance to an evil elf and his band of orcs, and like come in and try to kill their own people themselves. They're the aggressors here, but at the same time, I felt like it was kind of it cleared the I guess the moral lines between our heroes and our villains here, because the fact that they kind of regret killing their former villagers, their neighbors and so on, it made it clear who the good guys were, as if that wasn't already clear. I don't know where I'm going with this, really. It just
I think it works. I mean, the one thing that I like about it is the fact that you do have the orcs sending in the other people, like, okay, you want to prove your loyalty, then go die for us. But also, being orcs, they're thinking, throw them out there first and let them get killed. I mean, it works very naturally in that kind of a way, but also, I kind of had the same two minds that you did in terms of, should we really be mourning this so much given that they're the bad guys? But it's a lot easier to kind of think that when we're outside of it, looking in as third parties, not really connected to any of these people. But in some of the scenes where you see it, some of them are like reaching down to hold these people as if they were very, very close. So it's not like, just half the village who didn't know the other half went off. There could have been very close friends or even family members killing family members, in here. And so no matter what that person's done, you're still going to feel something for them just because there's all that history. So I think at the end of the day, it actually made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, it made sense strategically as well to send in the cannon fodder, which was good.
Yeah. I listened, watching it back, I listened for any like human screams or, just a moan or whatever when they were being killed. And I didn't hear any of that. So I kind of felt like it was a little bit of a bait and switch. Like there was no indication that there was any humans in there, but then they start pulling them off and it's like, there's all these humans, but they did these orc growls whenever they showed one getting killed. So I just kind of I was like, maybe let one villager see that, oh, these are humans, and then he gets killed. And so he's not able to tell anybody or whatever. I felt it was just kind of after the fact. They're like, oh, look, it was humans all this time.
Yeah, there was definitely a fake out aspect to it.
Yeah, there were clearly a lot of orcs at the beginning of the scene. All right, we've got more action shots here. Arondir has realised what's going on. And then we have one of my standout characters for this episode. We have Treadmill, I'm calling him. I think it was Treadwell or Treadwill, but I kept calling him Treadmill afterwards, and that's his name now. And so, yeah, it's kind of fun to see these like minor characters get names for 5 minutes and then die sometimes. Anyway,
was he the guy with the chocolate milk cow?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even though some of the characters that we followed for a while, it's like, what's that person's name?
Sometimes, yeah.
Peter Jackson moment.
Yeah, I was about to say. Yeah, you're right. We should have a ticker going for Peter Jackson moments.
Like Cinema Sins.
Yeah. So this was obviously an allusion to the scene where
took a little tumble off the cliff.
Exactly. Aragorn goes off the cliff with the Borg, and it's even the same actor, isn't it? I think so.
Jed Brophy.
I'm pretty sure it's Jed Brophy in both. Yeah,
I know. So. I'm pretty sure he was. They showed him in that beginning scene where they're doing the speech, and I think this was him too. So it was very much Peter Jackson, but I'm not positive that was him.
Yeah, I'm not positive either, but I suspect it's the same actor. I mean, certainly it was Jed in that scene in the Peter Jackson movie, and he's played several orcs in this, and it looks like him.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't look like him. He's not that ugly, but
he acts. He kind of has a certain way he acts as an orc now. Like you can recognize it.
Like this comment. Lexi, we miss you. Come back.
We do. I've
Just quick shout
heard
out
that there may be a return coming soon.
Yeah,
so.
I've heard the same. Yeah, I've been in touch with her as well. I messaged her a few weeks back. Just so she's on her way back at some point. Yeah, great spirit of humor on that channel, and excellent lore master and brilliant videos. So
and lovely snark.
Yeah,
yes, great wit. Oh my goodness, yeah.
Definitely check out Girl Next Gondor if you're not familiar. Yeah, quick shout out. But yeah, so yeah, this is Peter Jackson moment number 5 or 6 maybe at this point. And then Treadmill takes an arrow to the back.
And instantly, almost instantly dies from a shoulder blade hit.
Yeah, it takes 2. And he gets dragged inside and then dies on the table straight away. I think it's plausible because one of them could have gone for his heart. It's in that kind of region.
I wasn't sure where the second one went. The first one definitely looked like a shoulder blade, and I didn't think the second one was far off. I might be wrong, but
it's hard to make it out in the dark.
Yeah.
Yeah, not the most epic death scene you'll ever see, but.
And I hate to criticize stuff like that because it's in every movie. You know, the NPC characters always get killed instantly with anything, and then it's the heroes, they survive. Who knows what? But it's still annoying. Ooh. Be still my heart.
And so Bronwyn also takes an arrow through the shoulder, and this is going to become a plot point in the next scene. Arondir takes her inside. Theo's having a hard time with the situation, understandably. We got a bit more range from Theo in this episode. We got a little bit more emotion from him, and he's more than just a sort of like rebellious little teenager. He's kind of acting like a human being more in this episode, which is good.
His conversation with Arondir in the previous episode really kind of started to make him more of a character and less of just a cardboard.
Yeah, this is why I was saying in midweek on Chris's channel when Chris agreed with me. Like the last episode had some like massive like lore issues and logic issues with the plot and so on, but actually a lot of the characters are starting to feel more like characters in the last episode, which is kind of like the silver lining of that. And here we're seeing some of the good results of that. And so I think this scene was great, actually. Not my favorite scene in the episode, but his struggle with his mother's injury and his feelings of remorse and regret at having been partially the cause of some of this as well, having stolen that sword and everything and kept it a secret. We're sort of starting to see this character and who he's becoming. And his pain felt real. This is Arondir's hands, and I caught this screenshot simply because I'd not noticed that ring before, so that's kind of fun. Chris is going to be analyzing the Kirth on the ring tomorrow.
Yeah, no, I already mentioned it in my review. It was not 100% conclusive, but it seems like the letters I could read were. It also has something written on his bracer, and it's to my analysis the same written on this ring, and that says Plin something, and something is before it, which I couldn't really read. Plin is like a Fen word for arrow. And in Sindarin, the Quenya form would be Pilin for arrow. I think sometimes also Filin. And so it makes kind of sense because it's a thumb ring. I assume you need it for archery stuff, and that it tells something about an arrow is kind of interesting. But sadly, the word after it is like what was it, Ayel or something. But I couldn't make any sense out of that yet, so I have to put in more work.
So it's related to him being an archer, in other words.
Yeah.
Cool. Very cool. I like attention to detail like that. That's pretty awesome. Not only in the showmakers for thinking of that and, using their linguistic advisors that they presumably have in the costuming, but also for you for analysing that within a day. So very well done. Because I just noticed that ring, an hour ago. But, so Bronwyn is biting down on the piece of wood, and here we get the seeds come back again, which was cool. I liked this plot thread in this. Oh, it's not really a plot thread, but the fact that they'd set this up earlier in the season and then shown us that at the beginning of the episode with Adar, and then it comes back again, and so we know what's going on here with the seeds. As you said at the beginning, Chris, is not something from Tolkien as far as I'm aware, but I really actually liked what they did with this. And we actually get to see her be a healer, kind of, for herself, but it's kind of useful that is her profession.
What I really like about this, the idea is like we at the beginning, Adar basically plants the seeds and says basically a new life for the defiance of death or something like that. And here they also defy death using these seeds, not by planting, but by burning them and closing the wounds. So I felt like it's kind of interesting here to not create new life, but to basically
save life.
Save life, exactly, yeah. And that's why I thought, just from a directing perspective, I found it pretty cool that it was at the beginning here. It plays a role again, and before they were fighting, Aronde explained what these seeds mean, and they become important here again. So I really like that it goes through the episode in multiple places there, and that they do stuff with it. Found it really cool.
Anybody else have anything to add about the healing scene? Or
the only thing that and not to be the eternal critic here, but the only thing that I thought felt a little bit, it felt like it fell flat a little bit to me, was that in the original scene where Bronwyn gives him the seeds, she says, "We crushed them," and he doesn't crush them here. So it makes you wonder, like, do they actually have efficacy if you don't crush them? But if they do, then why do you need to crush them? And it's just like it would have had a better payoff in the sense that Chris is talking about if they had actually crushed them up before doing the rest of it, because I think it would have called back that other scene as well. And so that, I think, was a missed opportunity there.
Though I think they say in the episode that they crushed I always forget the English word for it. The petals?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I assume they crushed the petals to get the seeds out of them, maybe. I'm not sure, though.
That's kind of how I took it as.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be.
Maybe.
Joe's saying, was there a line like this? I thought Arondir corrected her, don't crush them.
Well, I don't think he corrected her. He asked, you crush them? Like, why would you do such a thing? Which, of course, from his perspective, he's not thinking of them as a healing herb. He's thinking of them as something that you plant to grow. So that's his his perspective on it, and that's why he's... And then she says, gently, as if that... Gently! Sorry, there's got to be a Princess Bride reference somewhere, right?
But it's still like it that because it characterizes kind of Arondir a little bit as like he's a grower, as it was said, and that it is closer to nature. I think that sells the I don't want to chop this tree scene a bit more later in episode 3 then.
Yeah.
Her blood drips down on the floor. I was actually thinking here about the sword.
Yeah, me too.
Because the sword's down there, isn't it? And it's a blood magic sword that's drawing blood out of her son. And so I immediately thought about the sword down there, actually, on the second watch through, after I knew that the sword was down there.
I thought about it at first because I thought the blood was going to go down and hit the sword, and that was going to give it away.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an intriguing shot where they lingered on the blood dripping through. Kind of effective from a cinematic point of view, because we're like kind of seeing her life's blood drain away, sort of thing, which is I think is part of what made Arondir and Theo's sort of pain more palatable, was the cinematography in this whole scene. So yeah, liked it. More shots of Bronwyn. And now the Rohirrim have arrived.
Peter Jackson!
Yeah. I also nitpicked on this scene already in my stream because
Good.
like we see the sun, I assume, rising, and where I live, the sun rises in the
east?
And they have to
Where
come
you
from
live.
the west. Except they went maybe a very huge detour around the village to attack from the east, but that makes no sense in my opinion.
Right, yeah, this is... Well, and the other thing too, like the Rohirrim don't even ride with the sunrise at their back. The sun comes from the south, because the great cloud is rolling back from the wind coming from the sea. So it's like you didn't... Like, there's ways to make this work without the sun coming up behind them.
Yeah.
But
definitely.
what I hated the most about the way they pulled this scene off was it comes right after a scene where there's not any fighting going on, really. I mean, it comes right after we see Bronwyn, and then it cuts away from this, and we just get a whole bunch more of the other stuff. It's like heroic moment that is apparently unconnected to anything we're witnessing elsewhere. The way it was connected to the other stuff just seemed so unconnected that it was just like, what was the point?
Yeah, I agree. Maybe it would have been better if they would have edited this shot in when they were still fighting the orcs. I feel that would probably connect it a bit better when the fight was actually going on.
Right.
Also,
yeah, but then we'd be nitpicking about that. It was like when Merry and Pippin were trying to get away from the orcs, and then the riders came in right outside the Fangorn forest. But I mean, there's always going to be something.
Yeah, that's true. What I also noticed, and is like it's already getting day here, and if you look into the tavern, it's completely dark outside. And then
that too.
Suddenly, it's morning, and I first thought. Now I looked today a bit into it again. Don't want to skip too far ahead here, but it's really. I thought maybe the tavern was filmed in a studio or something. That's why it's dark outside, and they simply didn't put in the detail there to light it up or whatever. But no, like the moment it's morning outside, so the sun has already risen. You also see the sun outside of the tavern, like even through the windows, you see, it's bright outside, and I really found this really strange. Like it felt like the writers are bending the laws of how time works in the show completely to their will, and it always kills a bit the immersion for me because, like, Adar enters the tavern. It's dark in the background. There's even a shot where you can see a bit out of the door, and it's completely dark outside, and you see the torches. And he goes, he talks to these people 5 minutes, goes outside, and suddenly it's daylight. Like, what?
Yeah.
I noticed it instantly. It really bothered me a bit.
It's those interstellar properties.
Yeah.
There's something to do with the orbit.
The time in this tavern just moves differently.
Yeah. But the timing of it is they've had no communication with anybody here, and to show up at the precise moment that the battle was going on
in the right village,
and
well,
maybe
that I'm okay with, like them knowing where to go, because Halbrand did tell them where the fight was going to be. It was going to be Elves Tirith, and so they're headed that way anyway. So that I didn't mind. It was just the timing of it, as you guys have been saying. I don't want to linger on this too long, otherwise we're just going to be ranting about stuff. How about the visuals of the actual charge? I mean,
nothing special, nothing bad. I thought it was okay, but
it worked. Yeah, it was okay.
The orcs bust in, and there's a little bit of a scuffle, but then they kind of hold their blades to some of the more vulnerable people, including Theo and Bronwyn, and so they have Arondir where they want him because he doesn't want to sacrifice his loved ones, his little family unit. And so there's Theo, a knife to his throat. And
you also see the darkness outside.
Yeah,
this is what you're talking about. You can see it's still pitch black out there.
Yeah.
And then it's suddenly not. I think you're right, Chris. I think probably this isn't a studio. It's probably not a real shack that they made somewhere in New Zealand. It's definitely a studio. type of
But
thing, which
interestingly,
means they should
later-
have complete control over the lighting. But
They should, but I think later you can look outside and it's actually in the location. So maybe a part was filmed in a studio and a part at the actual location or so. It seems really strange, I have to admit, if you really look at it frame by frame and look at the lighting.
Adar menacingly walks in and demands the sword. Arondir's not having it, and then Theo caves and hands it over, so he gives the sword hilt away.
I do
to
want
save his mother.
I do want to give this episode props here because, as I mentioned in my review, I am so glad that Arondir did not fall for the movie trope of, oh, he's threatening the one person I care about, let me give him what he wants, thinking that that's going to solve the problem, because why would you assume that ever? And Arondir actually does the smart thing. It's like, I have no guarantee that if I give you this thing, you're going to not kill her anyway. Why would I give it to you? So I'm actually glad that they went that route, because every time I see a movie where that happens, I'm like, why? And, finally somebody actually made a smart decision. So I do want to give credit where credit's due here.
And also what I liked, there was a scene earlier where you see when Arondir says, okay, I take the sword and hide it somewhere so nobody knows where it is. And you see Theo in the background looking at him. So they visually hint at, okay, Theo might have known where he went. And I found it maybe a bit much that he knows exactly where he puts it, under which stone in this huge tavern where the whole village is in. But
also, why hide it there? I mean,
yeah, it was a strange place, I have to agree.
It's one of the most obvious places to start looking.
Let's hide it where we're going to hide.
But yes, but seeing that so many stuff happened off screen in the previous episodes, like how the guards got captured from the watch and so on, I really like that they at least hinted at what might have happened, so we don't have to do the puzzling there.
Mm-hmm. Although I was thinking, maybe hoping that Theo was going to jab himself with the sword and make a kind of a futile attempt to stab Adar with it, but he just handed it over.
Kate's asking an interesting question here in the chat. Any chance that the mark on his arm allows him to have some sort of connection that allows him to locate it?
It doesn't seem like that's been hinted at in the show, really.
No, it doesn't. It's not impossible.
Yeah,
but it's hard to kind of justify that idea.
Well, I mean, if it's got magic properties, the ring will call out to its master. I don't find it impossible, and that if that was the case.
But then if that's the case, why do we need to see him seeing where Arondir is going with the sword? The implication there is the reason he knows is because he sees it. So,
Yeah.
It's a good follow-up question as well. What's the purpose of the mark? I think is that there's a purpose for us as the viewers, because we can see that there's a visible corruption that's taking place and that it's changing him somehow. But as to what the purpose of it in terms of the sword's design, I wouldn't be able to state
I thought
that.
the mark was just the
scab.
Scabbed from where he stabbed himself with it to make the sword.
The only reason I think it's not just the scab is because Waldrig still has a mark on his arm, and there's presumably no reason he would have done that anytime recently. So it seems a little more permanent than just a cut that heals.
Yeah.
But that's speculation.
Yeah. I think though that there might be more to the sword later on, because I found it on the purpose of this whole thing, I found it very underwhelming if it's just a key. We will talk about this in a moment, so go ahead.
Well, that's the end of the episode, so we've got a ways to go still.
Yeah, I probably won't make it quite that far.
It's possible that there's more to that sword than we've been told at this point. Well, we'll have to see. I was a little disappointed that it wasn't used in an actual sacrifice, because that's where I thought we were going with this.
Well, that's what the image makes it look like.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's actually somebody being stabbed on the statue in this tower. So
I thought like the amazing Black Morgoth magic will be unleashed and sorcery and whatnot, and then it's just like a key, and we got an Indiana Jones mechanism. I thought, okay,
Indiana Jones. Yeah. And so we get a scene where
Waldrick.
Adar, yeah, that's what the name I was trying to think of. Adar pops himself out, and day is breaking finally on the outside, at least, of the studio.
Conveniently.
And Waldrick is keeping watch outside, and he says to him, "I have a task for you." And then we cut to the Rohirrim coming in. I'm going to keep saying Rohirrim.
Yeah.
The Númenóreans arrive just in the nick of time, and Waldreg's presumably Scarpa's off screen. We don't see it, but we see him later on, as we all know.
And of course, we all know what he's doing, and that's one of the things that I found annoying about the remainder of this episode is the fact that they keep acting like we don't know what's happened, as if there's any real dramatic tension there, and it drags on and on and on and on and on and on. It's like, why?
Well, yes and no. I really think this, like, the last third of this episode is the strongest part. But yeah, I don't think they're trying to fool us with that. Like, that's why we got that scene. So I'm not surprised.
I dozed off when I watched it the first time through. So when Waldrick ended up having it, I was like, what? They never tried. And then I went back and watched it. I was like, oh, okay.
I can imagine if you miss this little detail scene that you probably get caught a bit off guard, so that it can kind of work.
Yeah, because I was like, was Waldrick hiding in the woods and he handed it off to him while he was riding the horse? I had no idea. And then I went back and watched it. I was like, oh, okay. At least I was a little upset at first that they didn't give a tie-in, but then that was my own fault because I closed my eyes briefly.
I mean, in a way, it was like this in previous episode where they didn't explain anything. It happened just off screen, and we just saw the result of it and think, okay, what just happened? Yeah. So that's also a bit on the show, I feel.
So we have the Númenóreans swooping in here, and their bright armor and their helmets. We have orcs.
And the orcs looks pretty awesome, one has to admit.
Yeah, I made sure I got a screenshot of this one because I love the way this orc looks.
Yeah.
The orcs look really cool in this show.
Yeah.
I think they've done a great job with the prosthetics. Yeah. And the costumes, actually. I think the costumes kind of make a lot of sense too. And so this was cool as well. I liked this. The chain tactic.
Although it's one of those things too, where it's like they just happened to know that was going to be useful in the scenario they were going into. It was a little convenient, but yeah, I mean, it wasn't that bad.
Maybe they sent in scouts first and we didn't see that. Or
more off-screen stuff.
Yeah, who knows?
They also always carry these spare chains with them around.
Yeah.
But what I find funny, it's a pretty cool scene. I liked it. I thought, okay, it's maybe a scene to knock out a bunch of orcs without getting too gory. So I thought, okay, it's probably not bad. What is funny, if you look at it screen by screen, it's again really extremely not nitpicking, but I just found it interesting that the face expression of these orcs doesn't change while the chain goes into their direction. So I assume they wear masks or so, maybe for protection reasons while filming this. I'm not sure what actually happened in the actual scene or so, but I can definitely see that there were maybe maybe it's to do with some safety concerns or something like that.
Well, I think the chain probably was post.
Yeah, probably the chain was post.
They had I can't imagine they would have tried to do that for real.
They showed this scene in one of the previews, one of the things months ago, and it looked really hokey. And I think somebody referred to it in a video as bowling for orcs. And but it kind of happened so quick, and in the battle, it didn't come off as super cheesy. It was, like you said, a little convenient, but chain reaction. But I thought it worked as far as in there, and it is a good tactic if you're, I mean, it's kind of like the barbed wire between the Oliphant's trunks when they're
Oh yeah.
at the Battle of Pelennor Fields when they have that. So
Yeah.
I
Also thought it was a cool scene.
Mm.
Maybe I'm curious if they shot it basically, I don't know, if they had like, I don't know, a rubber band or something so the actors knew when to fall over or something like that. Could imagine.
Landale riding in. Galadriel wielding her sword.
Oh,
And
this scene I liked. I think
you
I'm the
like
only
this?
one who does. Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of people don't like the scene. I can understand why, because she has like this plate armor and she shouldn't be so flexible, let's put it that way. But
I don't mind her
still-
being flexible, but as I like Nerd Cookie's description of this, she's Neo on a horse.
yeah,
It's just a little bit much, fellas.
it's true. It's maybe a bit much, but I found it was a fun scene.
I didn't mind it. I like there's some distinction with the abilities of an elf over a man.
Yeah. Like
Except
she's
in her
considered-
case, it's not elf versus man. It's just Galadriel versus everybody.
Yeah, and that's been probably my biggest criticism is that the other elves, whether it's the elves in Arondir's company or her elves, they've been so pathetic. To make Arondir and make Galadriel look super in battle, they've brought down the skill set of the other elves. And I think it would just, if they surrounded him with, Arondir's catching arrows and shooting him, but his commander just walks up a
gets
hill
one
and
in the
gets shot.
chest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's definitely.
And Treadmill took an arrow better than his commander did.
It's true.
It's also true.
This guy gets stuck in. Valandil.
What I liked
scenes with him later on.
with a scene, like he used the exact stabbing technique that Galadriel showed him.
Yeah.
Episode 4, I think.
Yeah. Stick him with the pointy end.
Yeah, basically. I kind of thought it was kind of cool that they referenced this again.
Yeah.
Isilda ends up riding in. It was I didn't actually get a screenshot of it, but Isilda is kind of looking pensive, and the Queen looks over at him and says, "Go." So it's kind of an interesting little character moment there, where she's got her eye on him and decides to send him in because she knows that her father is at risk and that he wants to be there fighting alongside him, I suppose. Humanizes her a little and kind of maybe shows her strength as a commander a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I like this scene also a little bit. Maybe I'm not sure why he was there. Maybe there's always some reserve. I have no idea about military stuff. So, or maybe because he's in the stable stuff or whatever, that he's more for the logistics or so and stays back. I have no idea. But also I want to appreciate Miriel's armor because I think it looks pretty good.
Yeah, I think so too. And Elendil, I do like his armor too. His helmet looks awesome.
Yeah. Also, I think the helmets are now fitting better than in the episode 4, whatever it was. Where also the helmets looked a bit bad.
I noticed that.
A little bit.
A bit big. That's the word.
Yeah, they looked like they were just kind of falling backwards because there was so much room in them.
Yeah, it looked like a little kid putting on a helmet that was way too big.
That looks like something that might protect the nose.
Yeah, as opposed to like the middle of your eyebrow.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he's just fresh out of, not even having actually any training really, particularly in fighting. So maybe he just didn't know how to put his helmet on in the previous episode, and somebody showed him en route how to wear a helmet. Maybe that's what it is.
Sure, we'll go with that.
Elendil gets in trouble. Isilda kind of leaps on his horse over a whole bunch of melee going on. Pretty cool scene. The orc with his scimitar and then we get a scene from Halbrand showing up, and we get a ton of Halbrands in the last part of this episode. So that's going to be fun to talk about. But Halbrand shows up and saves the day, gives Elendil a look, and kind of they have the nod, and he rides off. So I found this interesting because, of course, he's one of the characters that many people are theorizing may be Sauron in disguise. And so I'm not going to ask you guys for your kind of opinions on whether that's true. But
He's not.
one thing I noticed about this is that if he is, then there's kind of an irony here to the fact that he is saving Elendil and Isildur's lives on the slopes of Mount Doom. About 5 minutes before Mount Doom becomes Mount Doom. And so, it's going to be a moment we're going to look back at if that theory turns out to be true. I'm still kind of on the fence about it, but this episode did give me some reasons to think that theory might be true, which we'll get to in a moment. But yeah, fun kind of moment in a way.
Yeah, I'm hoping for maybe the Witch King because, I mean, weren't the 9 men were supposed to be, the 9 Nazgûl supposed to be kings, weren't they?
Nah, I don't know that all
depends
of them
on the version, I think.
Okay.
Not necessarily. We don't really know, but lords and kings, basically, like they're all supposed to be
great in some
people.
sense.
Yeah. I mean, they had to be people of power as far as because that's what they were seeking.
Although Tony Mead on Twitter was pointing out that some of his armor looks a lot like the shoulder pad that the King of the Dead has in Return of the King.
Yeah,
and so there's that theory as well.
I
which
like that
also
one too.
works. That also works in the connection with Isildur and Elendil because they're going to have that connection running through,
to
and
ask
then
him to fight,
and then he's going to be like, "Nope."
That works a hell of a lot better for me in terms of adaptation than him being Sauron.
Yes,
because he's now become the king of the Southlands, or he's just about to in this episode, and the Southlands no longer are habitable after this episode, presumably, not presumably. We know what happens, and so they're going to have to relocate. They're going to have to find a new place to go, and maybe there's a patch of land by the White Mountains where they can set up. And then we know what's going to happen with him, I suppose. So then they lose the surprise element and the puzzle box style story writing that they've been. If that's what happens, if he relocates, if his people relocate to there.
I find it always very interesting that Tolkien wrote a few things about that in some texts, I think published in the Vinya Tengwar, I think issue 42 or something. And there we get like additional information. I think they even mentioned that they worship Morgoth, that they had a Morgoth temple or something there. The men that would become the Oathbreakers and so on. So kind of interesting in this context here with his ancestors having like allegiance to Morgoth and so on.
On that note, I'm going to have to duck out. It is late and I need to eat dinner so I can help my wife get the kids to bed. So I will let y'all have the rest of this episode and appreciate you having me on, and hopefully we can do it again in the future.
Yeah, not a problem. It's great to have you. Thanks for taking your time. And one more time, everybody in the chat, do check out Joshua's channel. He's not always this critical of things. Sometimes he likes things too. And
it was
somebody who I have great respect for as a thinker about Tolkien and so on. So
absolutely
definitely commend it to people.
Appreciate it.
Cheers, Josh. See you again soon.
Bye.
Yeah, Josh, it was really fun with you.
And then there were 3. You guys good to keep going?
Yes.
I can keep going for an hour.
Okay.
2 or 3.
Well, I don't think we'll go for that long, Chris, but perfect. All right. So Halbrand, Isildur's kind of having a moment with his dad here, and he's like, I'm okay, Isil, I'm okay. I like this. I like this a lot. Mostly because Elendil is one of my favorite characters.
Yeah. I have to admit, I would have wished that Elendil is portrayed a little bit more powerful. Like, he struggles relatively. Like, I don't mind that he struggles when he's surrounded by some orcs and get pulled off his horse, but maybe show him, like, I don't know, just mowing down a few, because he's the one with Gil-galad who basically brings Sauron down, and then Isildur can finish the job, of course at the cost of his life. But yeah, I don't know. We can read in the Silmarillion. Oh, I don't have the quote in my head, but against Gil-galad's spear Aiglos and Narsil, nobody could stand a chance, and so on and so forth. Like, there's a cool line in the Silmarillion, which I forgot how it was worded exactly, but you probably know what I mean.
Yeah, and I had the same thought too. I was like, he, I would have liked to see him when he thought he was going off the horse, jump down and take him on and that sort of thing. So, but that's just he's been one of my favorites. So go ahead, Chris.
The host of Gil-galad and Elendil had the victory, for might of the elves was still great in those days, and the Numenoreans were strong and tall, and terrible in their wrath. Against Aiglos, the spear of Gil-galad, none could stand. And the sword of Elendil filled orcs and men with fear, for it shone with the light of the sun and the moon, and it was named Narsil. So pretty cool.
Yes.
He doesn't have Narsil yet.
Yeah, that's true though.
It's definitely going to be an upgrade on the sword that we saw him get towards the beginning of the season. We did see Narsil, but yeah.
Yeah, that's true. In episode 4, I think.
Yeah. Anyway, so yes, it would have been nice to see him, actually kill some orcs too. He sort of, I suppose he was like a big target with his big helmet with the Thor wings on, I kept thinking that helmet looks like something out of a Thor movie. It was pretty cool though. They've gone for
also a detail. I just came into my mind. I think Elendil was like over 300 years old when he fought in the Battle of the Last Alliance.
Yeah, I'm not sure how old he's supposed to be in this show. It's an interesting question. Definitely older than he looks. I'd imagine that they have, allowed for the fact that Numenoreans are very long-lived, because that's going to be important later. Yeah,
he died aged 322, according to Tolkien Gateway.
Yeah, that's old for a latter stage Numenorian as well.
That's very old.
Yeah, because he's of the line of Elros, but the ones early on lived a lot longer, and I've actually made a graph before of like the ages of all the kings, and it's just basically a descending line, like a graph that just goes down. As the ones further down live less and less, as the kind of grace of the Valar leaves them over time. One of the downsides of some of the time compression that they've done is like we don't really have a sense of that unless we know the books. The kind of gradual decline of the kind of nobility of the Numenoreans, although they were still strong and powerful at this point, which I guess we do get that pretty clearly when we sort of portray them the way that we have, in contrast to the Southlanders, who are basically farmers and don't have any significant technology or anything. Definitely Elendil could have had a bit more to do in the battle. Would have been cool. All right, let's move on again. So this is Peter Jackson moment number 8 or 9, I think. We get Adahad jumping on the horse, and Galadriel has a little moment with Arondir, and he says, "Oh, he's got the MacGuffin, so go chase him." Essentially, I mean, it's not quite that bluntly put, but that's pretty much how the line goes. I wanted to pause on this just for a moment because this was fun. So Arondir, obviously recognizes her. She's an elf celebrity, I guess, and says, "Oh." So Theo says to him, "Who was that?" And he's like, "Oh, that was Galadriel, the commander of the northern armies." And so this is the face that Theo makes when the camera focuses on him, and he's like, "Who's that girl?" I think he has a little bit of a Gimli crush going on, maybe.
Yeah. I really liked that little exchange there. Just because it was like, finally, there's some recognition of Gladriel. I kind of feel like she's just kind of been, waved off, whether it was when she came back and Gil-galad was, she just hasn't been taken seriously. And it's hard when you're threatening to kill everybody, but just to see that kind of reverence towards her, that's what I enjoyed seeing that.
We've seen that also from Isildur, I think, is the other character.
Yes,
kind of
exactly. So that her character, the exchanges with Isildur, that's when I felt like her character development really started.
Yeah, she's been much better the last couple of episodes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I think especially episode 5 did like a lot to her, but also already episode 4 did a bit of it. It was a bit forced though in 4, but whatever.
So yeah, this is our Peter Jackson moment. She says, "Not a limb." People keep saying that's Peter Jackson, but that line is in the book as well. Yeah, but it's obviously Glorfindel's line in the book, and he says it to set the horse off because he doesn't actually go with Frodo in the Flight to the Ford chapter in the book. So that was just kind of like a get you gone.
I think Asfaloth is also a white horse, right?
Yeah, a white horse with bells on it.
Yeah,
which I always find amusing. So yeah, but this was definitely the most Peter Jackson illusion that I've seen in this episode or ever of all time. Because this is so Arwen in the scene with the ring wraiths, and this is a nice shot, I thought. So coming up behind.
In general, I thought it was pretty nice how they shot the whole riding scenes and so on. Like, I don't know, feels at this speed through the horse and this lighting and so on. Probably not easy to shoot.
I just want to pick up on this question from the chat, or this comment. Jared here is saying, the only Sindarin we've heard so far, which is weird, but I guess it's because Quenya is way more fleshed out in real life. I think he means because Quenya is more developed, and so that there's less invention that you have to do in order to bring it to the screen, which might be one factor. I actually have a theory on this, and I put out a long tweet last night in the middle of the night because I just had a brainwave about it. And so I should have been sleeping, but I think, and this is my theory, I think characters are speaking Sindarin when they're speaking English. I think the scenes in Lindon are in Sindarin, but they're just being rendered in English for the viewers. Because they probably don't want to do whole 10-minute dialogues in Sindarin, and because of the drag for viewers. There was, in the first season of Star Trek Discovery, I'm a big Star Trek fan. In the first season of that show, they had like whole long dialogues with loads of exposition and stuff.
In Klingon, right?
In Klingon. And it was so obnoxious. It was really bad. And it was so boring and grating to watch. And so that show gradually got better, but that first season was really, really awful with the Klingon dialogue. And so some of the same producers might have been working on this actually, because that was also a bad robot.
It is possible that like Sindarin is treated like the standard language, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about Middle Earth at this point in history, right, there isn't really a common tongue at this point, actually. In the Third Age, in the Lord of the Rings era, there's a common tongue, which is Westron, which is kind of its antecedent was Adunaic, which the Númenóreans speak now in this era. And what happened was when the exiles from, the faithful sailed and colonized Gondor and Arnor and established those kingdoms, a kind of debased version of Adunaic became more widespread on the mainland and became the common tongue that is rendered as English in the Lord of the Rings books. So if you think about it, there isn't really a common tongue, which begs the question when we've got characters from the Southlands and from the Eldar and from the Númenóreans all having a conversation together, what language are they speaking? But does suggest a model whereby when characters are speaking in their own native language, they're speaking English, because otherwise it would just be incomprehensible to actually have the authentic languages all the time. We haven't heard any Adunaic yet either. Apart from names. We've gotten plenty of Sindarin names, but we just haven't heard it spoken because it's being rendered in English. So that's my theory on that.
Yeah, definitely possible. I think I had a similar thought some time ago, but there was like a scene where I think, did we see some orcs or so in there? And then it started to make less sense. But I would agree with you. Like in general, it can kind of work if you see Sindarin as kind of one of the standard languages at this time. But yeah. There also when Elendil spoke to the other horse, he also spoke in Sindarin. So it is like the second time we've seen this episode, and I just joked in my stream that standard language of horses is Sindarin confirmed.
Yeah, that's yet another Peter Jackson moment, of course. We'll get to that in a moment. And that is the other piece of Sindarin that we've gotten for the first time in this episode. But that's Elendil speaking not in his native tongue, so that's why it's in Sindarin.
I found it though a bit unusual. We had this scene a moment ago where Galadriel asks Aron, or looks at Arondi, and he says she speaks Quenya to him. So if she can maybe recognize him as a Sylvan elf, I think it would be more adequate to address him in Sindarin instead of Quenya.
Yeah, that's a bit weird. That is weird, I will say, because we've been told he's a Sylvan elf, but we also know that he was born in Beleriand, which is a bit strange. So he's the big outlier in that theory, and in that long tweet thread, I mentioned that because he's definitely a strange outlier in that model, but it kind of works for me anyway. So Halbrand catches up and cuts Adar off and trips the horsey. And what I really appreciated about this scene is that, well, first of all, we get to see Adar faceplant.
Good screenshot.
And gratefully, we get to see that the horse is not hurt by the fall. So that's nice.
Good horse.
Oh, yeah.
Stunt horse.
Yeah.
And Galadriel apparently had gotten her horse running so fast, she goes about 2 kilometers past. Because it takes a while for her to get back to interrupt.
Yeah. I think it would, though, wouldn't it? It would take a little while. I mean, they were going at a velocity, so.
Yeah.
Not a huge
they had a lot of time together, Adar and Halbrand, so.
Yeah. The typical time and space bending going on in the show.
Yeah. Yeah. She got into outer orbit.
So Adar on the floor. When he was on the floor like this, I kept thinking he looks a little bit like Wormtongue in the Lord of the Rings movies. Reminds me. Similar makeup and so on. So Halbrand catches up with him, stabs him through the hand, and
it looks like he has also black blood, interestingly.
Yes, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah, because it shows up later when Galadriel cuts him.
He is an Uruk, as he's about to say in the scene coming up. So I guess that kind of is consistent, makes sense. Or at least, something's been done to him. He's not entirely fully elf still. He's clearly slightly corrupted himself. It seems clear that he was originally an elf, and so something was done to him, I'm assuming. I'm still holding out for that process to be shown on screen, which would be interesting. Assuming he didn't die, which I don't think they're going to kill him off yet, but we'll see. Halbrand says, "You remember me? You remember me?" And this is the scene that people are pointing to with him possibly being Sauron, because obviously we've told that later on we're told that Adar thinks that he has killed Sauron, and I think we're meant to definitely think about this being a part of the puzzle here. I don't think it's necessarily a smoking gun that some people are claiming, but it's suggestive that, I mean, in these people's minds who are theorizing that this is Sauron in disguise, they're thinking that, I guess, his rationale for asking, "Do you remember me?" is, "Do I have to kill you and shut you up?" Because if he recognizes that he's Sauron, then the jig is up on whatever his plan is. Or it could be, we take it at face value, and this man is who he says he is, and this elf has done something horrible to him in the past, which we still don't quite know what that was. Yeah, interesting scene. Galadriel pulls him back and tells him, "We cannot quench our thirst with
seawater.
Yeah,
because that's what he says to her on the raft.
Yeah. Yeah. Any thoughts, Chris or Timbo? Go on.
I was just gonna say I liked that exchange where he's like, "Do you remember me?" And Adar's like, "No." You know, it's like that. You know, that guy who is just so bad to so many people he can't remember who he's been awful to. You know, and then if he is if it turns out he's Sauron, and he really did, you know, try and kill him, then it works both ways. So, but I like it. I prefer the one where he's just been so bad and so awful to so many people that he can't remember it.
No, I agree with Timbo there. Like, also said, Halbrand knows Adar, and I was kind of surprised that Adar doesn't seem to know who that guy is. But I don't know. It's interesting. Definitely, I see still the possibility on the table that he could be Sauron, though it's also not my favorite theory, I have to admit. But
somebody on Twitter today posted a tweet talking about how not only is he Sauron, but Galadriel is going to fall in love with him, and that is going to be similar to the setup for that was the line that Celebrimbor had about the Silmaril and how Morgoth's heart was nearly turned by the beauty of the Silmaril, and that this was part of Sauron's near redemption arc, and that this will be the tragedy of Sauron in this show. I saw that tweet and I was like, oh, I think that's my food coming up, because that is like my. I think in the reply, I think this is the reason I saw this tweet, is because in the replies, Matt from Nerd of the Rings was saying, "This is my least two favorite theories combined into one horror show." Yeah. Now, Josh is back in the chat here. Halbrand to Adar, it's like Drax to Thanos. Agree with Timbo and Chris. Yeah. I think the Tolkien professor was saying that yesterday on his Twitter thing that he does as well. It's also a bit like Thanos and Scarlet Witch as well in Avengers. Similar.
It's kind of strange. Like there are a few things I hope they don't go into this direction. Yeah. Because I don't see them getting out of this direction. If we consider that they have not forged the Rings of Power yet, then I don't know if let's assume they reveal who Sauron is in season 1, then they still have to do all the forging stuff and set up Eregion a bit better, which I assume we will see in the next season. And Sauron, I hope Sauron has kind of involvement into that. And then, I don't know, it would be very strange if we see then Halbrand there or something like that, or a character that says, "I'm not Halbrand, I'm now, I don't know, another name." And I don't know, I simply don't see the payoff here with all the Galadriel stuff and so on. It would make more sense, I guess, if Galadriel would be in Eregion or so, that he tries to get her trust or anything, but they put her Galadriel not so far, at least, inside Eregion, so she hasn't really anything to do with this particular plot line. But Halbrand at some point has to do, which I kind of find complicated. Of course, he could just pretend, haha, I was Sauron all the time, and now I take a different disguise, and he appears again. But then they would make the same trick twice or something like that. I feel maybe would feel cheap a bit, if you know what I mean. Like,
yeah,
I'm hoping that.
See it. Yeah, and I'm hoping that Sauron is with Celebrimbor right now.
Yeah.
You know, urging him on to build this forge so he can, you know, because we know it's not Halbrand that's been there urging him on. He's been off with Galadriel. So
I will say, like, of all the characters that people have surmised could be Sauron, Halbrand is the only one that makes any sense to me at this point.
Sadak.
But that doesn't mean, like, in internal sense to the like narrative in this show. Sadak, Gil Galad as well, actually, for that matter. I called him Darth Gil Galad earlier.
I think was it? Poppy.
Yeah, somebody
Nobody
was saying
suspect her.
Oh,
and you have never seen both of them at the same time.
So yeah, that's my thoughts on that at the moment. Don't want it to be true. I think there's quite a lot of logic and evidence to suggest that it might not be true. They're certainly teasing it. I think somebody in the chat was just saying this is a way to get the internet talking.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a fair point too.
And here we are talking.
Yeah,
on the internet about it.
It worked.
Yeah, it worked.
But I still hope it's not him, even though I don't see what they are going then instead. But I simply hope like we get a fresh character that shows up and people get suspicious. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting theorizing though, and I feel like they placed like a lot of little hints here and there that really keep us nerds going on discussing this in detail and so on. I mean, there's also the theory. I don't know, that maybe it's a stupid theory, I think, but stupid is probably too harsh a word, but it's not my favorite theory either, that maybe Sauron's being split into multiple beings, and maybe Adar was like the kind part that was left in Sauron, and it split into a different being, and that's what he meant by I split him open and killed him, basically. And the other two parts are maybe, I don't know, Meteor Men and Halbrand or whatever. And then they have to do the Dragon Ball fusion dance at the end to reunite or something. I don't know. I mean, that was also maybe it is a stupid theory.
Yeah, it's a stupid theory. Okay, let's move on. So yeah, Halbrand nearly kills him, which it makes sense whether or not he's secretly Sauron. Galadriel pulls him back, and I just want to give a shout out for Joseph Marley again here, because I mean he was my MVP of this whole episode. He was brilliant in this episode, and the way he's trying to manipulate them both and corrupt them both, and he's almost egging them on, and I just love this actor and this character at the moment. So yeah, massive shout out to him. I took this screenshot because it's really unflattering of Galadriel. So there's this one. So we cut back to orcs. Where are we here? Okay, so we've got Isildur and his friends, their little gathering. At this point, they start talking about how Galadriel took him prisoner, and so we know that through their dialogue here. The third wheel of this like trio of friends here, whose name I always forget.
Ontamo and Valandir.
Ontamo. I always want to say Ondosto, but that's a like town in Numenor. Say it again, just so I remember.
Ontamo.
Ontamo.
Well, Ontamo. I'm not sure where the stress is.
He's had enough of warfare, and so he says to his friends here that he's going to stay in the village and help these people, and kind of like that because it's realistic and sort of shows the horrors of war. And he very nearly died. He's covered in blood, And he was all quite gung-ho and eager to go. He was showing off to his fiancée when they were in the pub before they left in the last episode.
Yeah.
So I quite liked that. Did that resonate with you at all, Timbo, as somebody who's been in the military?
Yeah, I was on submarine, so a little different.
Right.
It was more the psychological thing that we get people, but you do, yeah. When we would do things like station watches for all the leaks, and count how many drips or steady stream or whatever, that sort of thing. But there's kind of this image in your mind of what you think it's going to be, and it never it is. And a lot of friends, and I was a diver as well, so worked with a lot of different with Marines and that sort of thing. But there's always that romanticism of war, and then it shows its true face. And there's some people who can't get enough of it, and some people who immediately have had enough.
Yeah, it's a really old story in a way, but it's something that doesn't feel tropey because it's still true. It's people going to war and not getting what they signed up for, and different experiences. And yeah, he's kind of low key, kind of a wise man, isn't he? Actually, of the three of them, I think he's the only one with a brain, because he's the conciliatory one in the argument scene that they had outside the pub afterwards. And I love the moment where he's like, "I'm just going to say I wouldn't have accepted your apology straight away, but I do appreciate it." I quite like this character, even though I can't remember his name. But yeah, I like this scene. I like this scene a lot. As Valandale comes up,
The Three Stooges. Somebody writes, I don't like it.
Yeah, people in the chat actually are talking, and Girl Next Gondor is instructing here as well. I wish I had Lexi on the stream. That would have been great. But anyway, about the idea of Tolkien and his writings on what happens if orcs surrender like this, and taking orcs prisoner. And I didn't know about this, so it's interesting. I'm going to have to look that up. Or
maybe I mentioned it in my
maybe
review
I
as
knew
well.
and I've forgotten, but that orcs surrendering, which is surely a rarity. These don't feel like normal orcs, do they? In a way. But I guess maybe they know about the fake out with Waldreg, and they know that he got away. So maybe that's why they surrendered. But yeah, interesting talking point, which I won't dwell on too much. But yeah. Now, speaking of orcs, though, this does lead us quite nicely into this next scene with Adar. I wish I'd made more notes on this whole conversation. As I said at the start of this has been my favorite scene so far of this entire show.
It was a highlight of the show for me as well.
Yeah, just brilliant when she asks where Sauron is, and he won't answer, but then he just sort of talks about his what he was trying to accomplish when he was up there in the north, which we get flashbacks to, and he insists on Uruk instead of Walk, or what does she call him? Moriandor. Dark was the translation, I think.
Yeah. We look into the episode. Something with Mori. Mori means dark. Yeah, children of the dark or something. I mean, just wait a moment where we find the scene here. First orcs, Uruk, okay.
And she refuses to give them personhood.
Moriondor.
Yeah. Yeah, so she refuses to accept that orcs are, have a heart and have a soul and so on. What I loved about this is because it actually kind of mirrors Tolkien's own doubts and kind of deliberations and so on the nature of orcs, because Tolkien himself wasn't really sure on this. And so I liked how aware this conversation was of that issue, and that it wasn't too heavy-handed either. It didn't take a position on it, but it showed us something about Galadriel, and it really made this villain come to life for me, because we also completely understand him rebelling against Sauron and taking control of this band of orcs kind of makes sense.
And that makes sense why they call him Adar,
yes,
our father, because he kind of took that. If all what he's saying is true, and he did try and kill Sauron to protect them, then I can see that.
This was the least surprising, reveal that there could be coming up in the next several episodes. His backstory. We kind of knew that from his name. It made perfect sense that he was one of the original orcs, and that's what everybody guessed when we first found out that his name was Adar, and we kind of were introduced to him. It was immediately everybody who knows Tolkien, that was their first theory, that he was one of the proto-orcs and was one of the first orcs, as Galadriel figures out here. And it shows, I think, the value of having storytelling that isn't necessarily kind of, how can I put this? Just dependent solely on the puzzle box, that it's the mystery that to get people talking and theorizing isn't like the only way of telling this kind of story, because his character has made sense from the beginning, and my only regret with him is that we haven't gotten even more of him, because he's been a really interesting villain that's been multifaceted and has really actually I'm gonna miss him when we don't get any more of him in season 2 and 3, because I actually really want to explore this character more. People are saying in the chat, I'm really glad that he's not Maglor. I never thought for a second that this was going to be Maglor. That never crossed my mind until I saw people saying this on social media. Some people wanted it to be Darth Maglor. Fair enough, if that's what you wanted. Chris, any thoughts? You said this was also your favorite scene.
Yeah, it was it has so many nuances and details in it, and explores, as you said at the very beginning of the stream, that it explores some very deep Tolkien themes in this in the show so far. And they talk about the ideas of is there redemption for the orcs in a way, because he makes a point that both are children of the master of the secret fire, the one, so Eru, God, and that is interesting. He talks about how Sauron devoted himself to healing Middle Earth, which I found made also perfectly sense if you explore the idea or Sauron's character a bit deeper. Then you learn that he wanted, I think it's in letter 183, that Tolkien described that Sauron wanted to become like a god king, and he wants to bring everything under his will and order Middle Earth according to this will, and bring it a new kind of order that he envisions. And I feel like that could be hinted here, and maybe this devotion is his planning of creating, for example, the One Ring or something like that, and to basically bring him to this particular place, point of power. And that I don't know, that was pretty cool in this scene. Then the whole idea of Galadriel should look into the mirror if she is looking for basically the enemy or the thing. I think there was a really, really strong line in this whole dialogue which made sense. And in the episodes previous, it's episode 5, or was it 4? No, it was the one where she talked to Halbrand in 5. She said basically that I got a mutiny, I got my best friend Elrond and my king basically tried to exile me. And she says then basically the line, maybe because they couldn't distinguish me anymore from what I'm fighting, from the evil I'm fighting. And here she also says I would kill first all the orcs and you last, so we can see it, and I could basically take out the whole evil with you at once, and so on. Shall we take the orcs out into the sun, and so on? She has a very evil and dark imagination of how to deal with this situation. And Adar, even though he also just let Waldrick kill Rowan, but I feel like with like he has a good point here, even though he is also like a very twisted character, as we learned so far. But he really has a good point, and it brings you also thinking that is probably really true. And as that, like a lot of details, I think, connected to it. We talked about that orcs could surrender, and I also mentioned that in my review a little bit, which basically said that orcs must be fought with utmost severity. They must not be dealt with their own terms of cruelty and treachery. Captives must not be tormented, not even to discover information for the defense of the homes of elves and men. If any orc surrendered and asked for mercy, they must be granted it, even at a cost. I think Tolkien continues here a bit and says basically that was what the wise said, but of course it was not always heeded. It's mentioned in Morgoth's Ring, and I feel like that is exactly like the point. I feel like that makes the scene so stick out for me. And as you said at the beginning, you were the Tolkien fan inside you was like nodding with his head along, and yeah, exactly that was also how I felt. There are just so many cool points in this discussion, and I felt like Galadriel found her match here. Like, of course, on the battlefield, she is probably undefeated and can kill everything, but here in this situation, and always when in other dialogue situations, she was bad at diplomacy, but she still was kind of strong and always had a presence and made her point clear, and she didn't care if she gets arrested or not. She wanted to get her point across, and she had very little opposition a lot of the times. Here now we have like an opponent on a verbal level that almost brings her to kill him. It's a classic movie trope in a way, but I felt it was well executed, and it was a lot of fun to see her then at the end. And Halbrand now has to stop her killing him again, and it was I don't know, it's really fantastic scene in this context. I feel we could talk out for hours for just about this particular scene, I feel.
Yeah, this is the only scene so far in this show that I think I'll definitely be talking about for years to come and thinking about. Maybe not the only thing. Well, I'll definitely be thinking about other scenes, but I'll be thinking about this in a way that I won't be thinking about others because of just how many questions it raises and just how thoughtful it was. As you say, the other part that I really, really liked about this as well was the way that Sauron was presented as somebody who had not necessarily good intentions, but kind of good intentions within his own, moral framework. As it stands at the beginning of the Second Age, that he was trying to repent in a way that was twisted, where he was seeking order and restoration and healing for Middle-earth, which is straight out of Tolkien's letters. As you said, I actually quoted that exact quote that you just read out in my video from a couple of weeks ago that I wrote about Sauron. So when that line came out, I was like, "Oh, they've read the letter."
Exactly. Like, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome, and I've never seen that actually really properly explored in any other adaptation of Tolkien either. Peter Jackson never really got close to exploring that issue, and although there's that letter, it's not a particularly deep cut reference, where Elrond in the Council of Elrond in the Lord of the Rings says, nothing was evil from the beginning. Even Sauron was not so. And so it's, people understand that if they've read the books, that Sauron himself came to evil and fell. He had a fall as well. I'm just being a bit stroking my chin here on this whole scene because this is what I was doing when I was watching it. Timbo, you've been a little quiet. Do you want to add anything?
No, I really, his origins, by far, you know, in this, he's come to be my favorite character of the show so far. Just to think about kind of the struggle that he's been through as part of Sauron's and Morgoth's army and their plots and their ploys, but then it was even too much for him, and so he, you know, he saves the orcs, and he sees them as having a value, as you know, maybe not a human being, but a life, and you know, and in that situation where Galadriel's like, what if I just take them out into the sun? You know, kind of, how would you like that? Kill your children or whatever. It's like, you know, he has the value for them, which you look at people to respect. You know, you want to see that from people, that they value, you know, lives of people, and when, you know, there's such a struggle there, and she can't even see that you know, maybe there is some value. Now it's hard when you have a world where, you know, the orcs will always be in conflict with the humans or whatever, but it just to see that what it went into with his character, and that it's not, you know, he's not just some sort of homicidal maniac who's just going and burning and killing these villages just for, you know, just for kicking around something to do. I yeah, his character for me in this was, and what Josh had said, like he feels like this was the best writer who's working on this series wrote this scene. That's kind of, I think that sums it up pretty good too.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like that's another interesting theme I thought was the destruction of evil itself. Like Adar in episode what is it, 4, when he gets 4, when Arondir meets him, he talks about that he was told many lies and that the world has to made anew. And it's kind of exactly like this. Like Galadriel can't just kill all the orcs and then evil is gone. Like she, and maybe Sauron on top of that, evil always comes back. And I feel like this was really well tied into this episode. We spoke at the beginning, Udun kind of meets underworld, hell, like in a mythological sense. And she maybe thinks in her point that she can undo evil, but she can't. She's basically, Morgoth was defeated and thrown into the void, and he's still causing trouble because this volcano that we see, Mount Doom, is also a relic of Morgoth. It's still there, and she will see how much trouble it will cause just in a few minutes. And it is, as a result, I found this very interesting because in Tolkien's works, or in Tolkien's universe, there is the concept of Arda Mad and Arda Healed. And Arda Healed can only be an Arda that is remade anew. The old Arda has to be destroyed and completely remade without the evil in it. And that is the only option. I think Galadriel has not realized this, but maybe realizes this now when she sees what's coming next, or in a few moments. And I felt that was, as a result, a very, very powerful moment there when she stares with this almost 1,000 yards stare, or whatever, call it, into this wall of fire and smoke. Like, pretty cool.
Okay. I think that's all we can say about this scene for now. I think, yeah, I'll have more to say on it in the future, I'm sure. But yeah, one thing I would say, and the angles in this scene are a little odd sometimes. Like, just bring us back to cinematography just briefly, but yeah, kind of fun, I guess.
And noteworthy, but I feel. But I kind of liked them.
Yeah, I didn't dislike them, but it's just a thing. Like every single angle, every single. I'm not a good enough analyst of television to know what is trying to be conveyed by this particularly, but it's noteworthy that every single angle is just askew. There's not a single shot that's just like a level shot.
Might have been a broken tripod that day.
Maybe. This is the flashback scene to the fortress in the north, which, as I said earlier, I think is a Tumno.
Yeah,
that's my theory, and I'm sticking with it. And this looks like Sauron's anvil, and we visited this location in episode 1, so it's connecting the dots finally a little. Halbrand steps in and kind of pulls her back from the darkness, and she thanks him for it later on. And this is another kind of tease that who is this guy that we get here is Adar asking, "Who are you?" And he pauses before he walks off, and he makes an interesting face afterwards. What do you guys think? Is that recognition or understanding, or? And actually, there's another question connected to this that I should probably ask as well. He tells Galadriel that he killed Sauron and split him in half. Do we think that he honestly believes that, or do we doubt his word on this? Because I tend to think he was probably lying about that. I think Galadriel thinks that too as well, but I don't.
I think like the show is so strange at parts that I could actually believe it. So I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's kind of it's interesting. Maybe he lies, though. I would argue that from his characterization, it would make sense. Like if Sauron is experimenting and is sacrificing his orcs, his children, then at some point he says, "Okay, dude, that's enough," and then maybe had like an opportunity to attack him or so. Of course, you can't simply kill Sauron as you can simply go to Mordor, and it's kind of, I don't know. It's really strange, though. Even if you kill like a Maiar, his physical form of a Maiar, then it would have consequences for him. Like Saruman, for example, or even a Balrog, if killed, can't just get back if their physical appearance is destroyed in a way or killed. So there is definitely a component to this. Sauron can maybe do because the One Ring is not destroyed, and as a result, he keeps there. But usually, he then has the consequence that he can't take a fair form anymore. And to the point of that, his physical form was never fully destroyed. So I feel like, I don't know. I'm not sure where they are going with this. I hope it's a lie. So that would make more sense in all this context, or we come up with my very stupid theory, where he's kind of split. But as I said, I don't believe it myself.
Just wanted to say bye, Lexi. Thanks for.
Oh yeah, goodbye.
Hi, Lexi.
Yeah, it was good to see you again.
Yeah, I think I took it as he believed that he thought he had killed Sauron, and Sauron is somehow still using him to achieve what he wants, which is Mordor. I don't know. I didn't take it as he was doing this for someone else.
That's a very good point. I think that really, maybe, I mean, Sauron is a very, very evil being. Like if we think about the story of one of the followers of Barahir, Gorlim, I think is his name. Like he also tricked him really, really badly, and I feel like it would be his style. Like he uses Adar without even his knowledge in a way that he does still the goals of Sauron. At the end, he turns out, and maybe Adar realized, oh no, I worked for Sauron the whole time. I didn't even know. Like,
yeah, that's kind of that's how I took it, and
that's probably.
I kind of liked that. I liked that idea of Sauron still manipulating him, even though he thinks he's free of Sauron. Oh, I like that. What Joe said. Maybe the black sword broke when Adar used it on Sauron.
Yeah,
that's an interesting idea as well. Yeah.
No one's really asking the question actually about that sword. It's an interesting one because there's definitely
maybe that's as much as it was ever made. Well, I guess it it's just so weird that it was just a key.
Yeah, would be strange.
So this scene, got this kind of another follow-up heart-to-heart moment. Galadriel and Halbrand, she thanks him for pulling her back from killing him, and he says, "You pulled me back first." And so they bond over it, and he says, it's an interesting line that he says, where he says, that feeling that I had, referring to, the feeling of like being at peace, I suppose, in a sense, where he was fighting at her side. He wishes that he could bind it to his very being, etc.
In the darkness.
Yeah, exactly.
And earlier at the beginning of the episode, also an orc said, "Gimbajul, find them."
Mm-hmm.
I found that also kind of funny. Like maybe there's also the lines "rule" and find them. Not find them. What was the other line? Bind them, find them, bring them. It would be funny if all the quotes were
dropped in. The whole poem is dropped in line by line in each episode.
Would be pretty cool. So yeah, the scene, like I said earlier, the potential romantic tension that is going on there, I'm not sure if, like, you can see it both ways. I feel like Halbrand and Galadriel are both characters in this show that are very driven. Like Galadriel, somebody voted in my chat, like, sometimes feels like she has PTSD, like she sees an enemy in everyone, has some symptoms. I'm not an expert on that, but it sounded, at least for me, plausible. And I don't know. I think Halbrand, his reaction to Adar when he has a spear and wants to kill him, like if there would be nothing, he would know there would be no need for him being pulled back by Galadriel to not kill him. So there must be some history he remembers, even though Adar doesn't know. So I feel like he's also driven by that. And when he talks to Galadriel in Numenor, it was basically kind of similar, that he said, I swore to never return to that place. And it felt like, there's really something very, very dark deep in him that bothers him a lot, that prevents him from returning there. And I could maybe imagine that his past kind of mirrors that of Galadriel, that he wanted to do something good, but became also evil in this way. And this caused him a lot of trouble, only with the difference that in his character development, he's much further than Galadriel was at the time they met. And so they maybe mirror each other in a way. And I think that when they were fighting, I assume one of the convincing arguments is that he should return and maybe find redemption there. And I think the hunt for the enemy is potential some redemption that they are hoping for, that they maybe can destroy Sauron and the orcs or whatever and help the people there. And he says basically that the fighting with you kind of made me almost free from this old evil darkness in myself, and that this he want to keep it that way, and that's what he want to express. So I feel like you could even see this more as, okay, we are kind of soulmates in this regard, because we're very similar in a weird way, not necessarily as a romantic thing. So I'm not sure though, but I simply hope they don't go this romantic direction. It would be, my opinion, terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if they do go there, I think it'll be obviously very fleeting and won't last, and it'll be kind of, probably it'll be punctuated by some kind of tragic occurrence, whether he betrays them all or he dies or something bad is going to happen there. So I don't know. I could see them going there, because who knows with this show, but it's I also agree. I hope that they don't, and I didn't necessarily see sexual tension in this scene. I didn't think, but there's some interesting dynamics between these two characters, and they may well go there, because certainly there's a lot of people out there that kind of want this to happen as well. There's a bunch of people on Twitter that I've seen tweeting about this, shipping these two, and I don't know whether it's done ironically or not, because I don't know. I don't want Tolkien to necessarily turn into a thing where we ship character pairings like that. It's this isn't Harry Potter, So it's not somewhere I really want to go. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being a little bit snobby there, but but it's in terms of the story that they're telling. I don't necessarily think that it needs that. I think what Chris described of these characters having a kinship and a kind of common cause at this point in time is what this conversation was really about. So I didn't really see sexual tension or romantic.
Yeah, I think it was just more. It was more worry. If you watch this scene, you're just worried that's the direction they're going to go. You might see it a little more. So I'm hoping they don't go there. Got a lot of Celeborn memes lined up if they do.
Yes. Oh, the internet will meme.
Yes.
Yes, they will. I mean, they will anyway. So
I know.
I drink and I meme.
Yeah.
Exactly.
This was an interesting look at the end of this conversation. Nicely acted.
Yeah.
She cleaned her dagger as well. It's nice that they took the moment to show that as well. This sort of recurring symbol of her guilt and her oath to her brother and her vengeance. This is just another battle in the end of the day, and she hasn't found her prey, which I think is going to frustrate her, and we'll see her probably regress a little bit after this, which would be natural. But she's on a path, and that knife has been a sort of symbol of that. So anyway, we're almost at the end of the episode here. We see Muriel and Bronwyn, and we are introduced to Halbrand once again. They're returning from their little chat, and
I really like
Muriel
how happy
introduces
Miriel
him.
looks.
Sorry?
I really like how happy Miriel looks. Like she has this expression in her face. Oh, awesome! I'm helping these people. It seems like my father said darkness, but so far it's went pretty well, right?
Yeah, I was thinking about that
wrong?
On my second watch. I was thinking about that conversation with her father from the last episode. I was like, "Oh, Dad is crazy. Why do I listen to him?" He was just like all smiles and smiles, and so Bronwyn notices the little sigil on the pouch there. His keyring, and so she looks at him and is like, "Oh my gosh, is this the king that we were promised?" And he's like, "Yes." He does a little look to the side, and then Galadriel, who I think is still standing behind him at this point, although it wasn't really clear, but I don't think that they make eye contact. But the camera focuses on her for a second, which I don't think I got a screenshot of here. But she sort of nods and eggs him on, and so he kind of looks down, and then he looks up, and he was like, "Yes, I am." And this was the only scene that I really thought was tipping me towards him possibly being Sauron and those people being right, actually, because this wasn't deliberately put here to make me think and wonder about him. This was just acting and direction making me think this is a bit off. This feels wrong. And maybe it's because we already know how sort of duplicitous and untrustworthy and unscrupulous this guy can be. So putting him in this position feels like a bad idea. But also I think the acting kind of made me just feel this is not right. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too hard on Halbrand, but
I feel like the Halbrand actor is so good at, like, he acts really well, in my opinion. He really gives his acting sometimes this little something that you feel something is wrong with that guy.
Yeah.
And of course, I think that's on purpose, but yeah, it's really it does really well, in my opinion. Halbrand is also a very interesting character, I have to admit. Also, I was wrong, sadly, that my prediction was that Theo is maybe the son of Halbrand, but at least Bronwyn doesn't recognize the father.
Yeah,
doesn't appear to me, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
well,
I thought maybe they've told the actor who plays Halbrand that he is Sauron, but he's not really. So he plays the character like he is.
Yeah.
Kind of like with Luke Skywalker being the only one who knew what Darth Vader said in the final, that he was his father, but nobody else knew in the story, and the actor didn't even say that line. You know, when they filmed it, it was put in with voiceover later. So his reaction was to that. But yeah, maybe this guy thinks he's going to be Sauron, and so he's acting that way. But he does a good job, you know, and his character is just, you know, keeps you guessing.
Yeah.
They all raise their glasses and toast him.
Free drinks for everyone.
Yeah,
I'm surprised they didn't say that line this time.
Let's totally forget that they maybe starved a few days ago almost.
Yeah. Everyone likes a drink in this show, don't they?
They do.
It also feels a bit like the number of villagers has regenerated a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, there are, of course, Numenorians there, but considering they were not that many to begin with, then they were split in half, then some were killed, then all fitted into a tavern, and a few of them also died, and now we're here.
True. Maybe some others came from other villages in the meantime.
And it's funny how the population
there, but
yeah, and the population of this village looks similar to the population of Numenor, which is astounding.
Nick, free drinks from Waldrake's meat bar. Nick was on the show a few weeks ago, who's is one of the co-hosts from the Silmarillion film project.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, I think we were joking on that episode about Waldrake's bar. Like, what is it? Because it's like it's like a bar, but they have meat hanging off. Like, I think that was that.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. But also, like when I saw this scene here, the past one, we see Bronwyn walking around. There are tables with food. The corpses are gone already. It literally feels like some days have passed or something after the fighting, like maybe next day or few days at least. And you have to keep in mind, what is Waldrick with his sword doing all this time, carrying it to a place that is literally like a few hours walking away? Like, Arondir could make it from the tower to the village in, like, I don't know, the same night, it felt. Like it was basically around the corner, if that makes sense. And I feel like that's another convenient bending of time.
Maybe he had to move all those stones out of the way.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah, Chris, you know that thing you do when you start streaming and you lose all concept of time and you end up streaming for 7 hours? I think you're going to need to do that to enjoy this show. So,
yeah.
So next scene, Galadriel talks to Arondir, and he I'm forgetting exactly what they talked about here. Maybe I'm tired.
Yeah, I'm totally blanking on this scene right now.
Wasn't he giving the sword back to him?
Yeah, that's the outcome. I don't remember the dialogue. But yeah, he takes the sword, what he thinks is the sword, and he gives it to Theo.
Just look it up really fast. I also forgot what it was exactly she said. The men of these lands have awaited this moment a long time.
Oh,
no,
that's right.
Not nearly as long as the elves.
Been waiting even longer. Meaning him, I guess. Like, he can go home now, I suppose, is the implication. Yeah. Because, you know, these people have redeemed themselves and we don't need to spy on them anymore. And also your watchtower has been knocked down. So I guess that's, you know, the king has returned. So yeah, we get this nice scene with these two. These two have only had like a couple of scenes together, but they're doing kind of good with these two characters. I like this relationship, this whole family unit, and Theo confesses that he misses the power of the sword and that he wants that feeling back and so on. Aside from his guilt, he's also feeling a sense of loss. And Arondir hands it over and says to him, "They'll give it to the Numenorians and they'll take it away and throw it in the sea on their way home."
I feel like
that's when the fake out is revealed, which we knew was coming.
I feel like this scene kind of, maybe I'm wrong, of course, but hints a bit at that there's maybe more to the sword than just being a key. I hope it is, because I found this very, very underwhelming if it was just a key for like just a MacGuffin for this. Like maybe there's more to it.
I hope so. Yeah, it feels like there should be, because it's the fact that the sword was broken is something that hasn't been talked about enough.
Yeah.
Somebody was saying to me, and I don't know who it was, or somebody that I overheard, or somebody that I was watching their coverage of the show, we're talking about the possibility that Halbrand's name might mean broken sword, which might be another Sauron clue, potentially. If that sword was used to,
wasn't it
split him in half.
I think I thought about the etymology as well.
Might have been you, actually. Yeah, maybe.
Wasn't it intact sword?
Sorry, say that again.
Wasn't Hal the word for complete or intact? Like I think the English word whole comes from that. I'm not 100% sure though.
Yeah, probably hale as well, as in like healthy.
Could try to find it though, but
I'm not certain. But anyway, we cut to Waldrake. I'm kind of eager to end this stream now. We're going to go for over 3 hours, so we're nearly at the end. So let's move on.
Yeah, sound healthy,
certainly...
intact.
Right. Okay. Yeah, it sounds like you've come to the opposite conclusion to whoever I was watching or reading or whatever, wherever I picked that up from. So saturated by information about the discourse on this show that it's hard to know where I've gone things sometimes.
Yeah.
So frickin' Waldrake runs off and slots the key in the keyhole and turns on the doomsday device like it's a car, like it's a Toyota Prius or something. It's just like put the key in the slot and turn it, and it's that easy. I didn't get any of the screenshots of the dam breaking, I don't think.
Oh no.
So just quickly, we've got another bit of Cinder in here, and this is another Peter Jackson movie moment, obviously, because this is an allusion to Aragorn speaking to the Rohirric horse. It's pretty clear, I think. So many in this episode. I think there's about 10 now that we've counted. I'm sure we've got some. So this is another bit of Cinder in. Nice dialogue with Isildur. And they start to, I think these two are starting to understand each other and trust each other a little more and open up. It's a good kind of character growth moment for these two.
But yeah, it's kind of interesting. With that was a cool character moment, and as you say, and probably works better. I still find like the whole trench digging part, like I mentioned it like earlier, like it was just to like, even if you look at the map, it kind of makes so little sense. So where did they like, there's a hole in the ground somewhere? Did they dig that too? Like I don't get this. Like this whole scene makes no sense, kind of. I really, this is one of the parts I really like least.
Really? See, I liked this part of it because it's like, how do you force a volcano, which is, been there kind of dormant or whatever? How do you force that to explode?
Well, the physics of it work.
Yeah.
Like if you put that much water into a volcano, that is what will happen.
Yeah, I mean the physics were not my problem. Just how this whole couldn't they just use another river for that? Couldn't they just, I don't know, use all the cloths they had, transport them there, and then, I don't know, build a gigantic water storage out of it? I don't know what, you know what I mean? Like, weren't there better ways? Why does it have to be this key? Like, what if the key was brought by the elves somewhere else, like to Lindon or so, and would be completely out of reach for Adar? Didn't he have like a plan B or something? Like, I don't know. It's just,
there's a spare key under the mat.
Okay. Like it just felt the whole idea. Like just imagine this whole sword thing would be just a key in the show. It would feel like so incredibly underwhelming. I feel like it was such a big topic, and what have we theorized about it? It's an ancient Morgul or proto version of a Morgul blade or something like that. And then no, it's just a key for this.
People have been
this
talking
old-
about Gurthang and all sorts.
Yeah, it's
for
just
literally years now about the sword. Well, maybe not literally years.
It's like my brother had a key that looked like it looked like a guitar. Maybe that can be one of the things that we buy is a key for your car that looks like the blade, the broken blade.
yeah. If that should be it, it would be pretty underwhelming. I agree with Rosie here.
Yeah. I mean, the sword has the map of Mordor on it, doesn't it? The mysterious symbol that Galadriel was seeking that was carved onto her brother's chest for some reason. It was on that sword, so that implies that sword was always, for this plan.
For that,
but yeah, I do think maybe there will be a little bit more to the backstory of the sword that we'll find out potentially, or
especially
maybe not. Who knows?
They also show in the previous episode some map information where Tirharad is, and there's this gigantic tree on the map, and it's in the south. This is where the trench digging was going on. And now in this episode, we learned no, it was not in the south. They digged up all the way to the north, like because Orodruin is north of Tirharad, and like all these information I get and analyzed in these countless streams I did, like at the end turns out makes no sense at all. I felt betrayed.
Teaches you a lesson.
Yeah, that teaches me a lesson. Stop over-analyzing our show.
They want us doing this. Yeah, Rosie in the chat here is pointing out something that I never say on these streams often enough. Do the YouTuber thing and like and subscribe if you're new. We have conversations like this every week with different people on this show and in the future about other Tolkien lore aspects and everything else. Smash the like button. If you are watching this on the video on demand and you've watched this entire 3-hour and a quarter breakdown, please do comment below and let us know if you have theories about anything or anything else you want to add, or if you just enjoyed the stream, let us know, because that's always nice to know too. So yeah, lovely jubbly, do the YouTube things. So I said it, and thank you for the reminder, Rosie.
Yes, thank you, Rosie.
Yeah,
I need to make Rosie a mod at some point. Rosie's awesome. I love Rosie. So thank you for coming.
Yes,
I love
everybody.
All of you guys.
Everybody loves Rosie.
Yeah, I love all you guys in the chat. Honestly, it's so nice doing these and having people show up every week, because it's like validating that I'm not just completely unentertaining. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. I 100% know what you mean. I can also believe that people listen to me. Sometimes I'm also doing this alone, so I not even have a guest, and people listen to my stuff like a lot of long times. I wonder with myself, why?
So our Numenorian heroes realize with horror what's happening, and gas mains start blowing up all through the town square.
All the tunnel digging now.
Like, oh, Dad was right.
Dad was right. Oh no.
The orcs know what's up, and they start chanting "Udun, Udun," which is clearly this was part of their plan. So they know what was happening. And this guy is like, "Waldrake, you beauty."
Yeah. I really love this scene where he lays on the ground listening to the water, and then this cool shot where it goes through the floor of the barn, and then we see the tunnel and the water. Really cool shot. I love shots like these.
So the trenches have a purpose.
No, don't have a purpose.
And then we see the water stream down into the mountain of fire,
where the One Ring will be forged at some point.
Yeah, and destroyed at some point too.
Exactly.
We're looking at the resting place of Gollum.
Yeah.
Basically.
And Frodo's finger.
Yeah.
And Frodo's finger.
And so big explosion. Galadriel's
Yeah, the explosions look pretty nice. I have to give them credit for that.
Yeah, it's very good CGI.
Yeah, that's
hard. It's hard to get that one wrong, actually, though. To be fair,
Yeah.
I guess too.
But it's good.
Yeah, we still appreciate it.
And hopefully this week I'll get a live stream out and paint the volcano.
Oh,
that
sweet.
was my plan.
Cool.
That'd be good.
That was my plan for this week, but a hurricane came.
Yeah.
How does one draw an exploding volcano? What's the technique for that?
Well,
Paint,
I would actually put the glow behind it and then paint the mountain in front and then come up. I kind of did that. I drew Mount Doom or painted Mount Doom before, but it's like you put the glow behind it and then put the volcano right above it and then do the lava coming down. So, but
exploding Mount Doom is a different concept.
Yeah.
I mean, if you try to paint that, it might end up looking like a Jackson Pollock or something. It's just like,
we'll see. I've never done it before, so that's sometimes I have probably about 3 or 4 paintings that are just thrown into a pile that episode never. I just, I went, nah.
Oh, this is a nice shot. I didn't really catch this scene before. Muriel's face.
Yeah, some of her facial expressions.
Yeah. Like, shit, Dad was right.
No.
He could have been a bit more specific though, couldn't he? Tar Palantir.
Yeah.
Like
big lava balls will hit people and just vaporize them.
Just quickly, actually, we mentioned the science of pouring vast amounts of water into a dormant volcano and the effects of that, which it seems legit to me that was it, caused the effect that we see here. And it's I say this with the caveat of talking about science in a Lord of the Rings show is kind of like, what are you even analyzing it based on?
Yeah, we don't even know how time actually works there. So.
Yeah,
true. But a lot of people are talking about this the pyroclastic flow and whether it'll be possible for anybody to survive this.
No.
My thinking is no. But also, we have 2 hobbits climbing up an active volcano at the end of The Lord of the Rings and actually going inside the volcano and having a whole conversation while the volcano is erupting and not dying too in The Lord of the Rings. So kind of
there's a reason
about you don't think about the science too much. You don't
you can't put too much because you see somebody getting that close in these volcanoes, these active volcanoes, they have that big silver shield suit on, that heat shield suit. So I mean, just being next to it when it's like that exploding, now that slow creep lava, but
Emil is admiring your paintings, I think. I think this is pretty much the end of the episode here. This one shot of Halbrand caught my eye, so I'm make sure I got a screenshot of this. Him, it looks like he's trying to protect the civilians, which is kind of
I would think if this was his plan coming together, he'd be over there like, yes.
Well, you would think so, potentially. Unless he's still got things to do, which is what some people would say, is that he still has to go back to Eregion, and his plan is only half cooked at this point.
Also, Miriel is helping some of the civilians as well, which I found pretty cool.
Yeah, I found that cool as well. Yeah. Good Queen Miriel. And this is the end of the episode. It's, Galadriel's kind of broken here.
He's broken, especially
scams.
like now she put so much energy into basically convincing Halbrand to come here and so on, and now she sees in front of her eyes how this place turns to literally hell. To Udun, and I found this a really strong scene. Like she stands there and stares into it, and she doesn't move. Some people might criticize this, but I really think she sells this this stare, like I said, this, what do you call it, 1,000-yard stare.
Yeah, not much you're gonna do.
Yeah, it's just, oh boy, we are doomed.
Well,
Go on, Tim.
I was just going to say, I tweeted out earlier a picture from one of those press shots where it was Galadriel in all her armor and there was an explosion behind her and she's not even looking at it. And when I saw that, the first thing I was like, oh, don't tell me they're going to do one of those cool guy walking away from the explosion, not looking back. But then seeing this, I was pretty relieved that, she wasn't looking back at that explosion behind her, because there was this massive one happening in front of her. So
this is nice. This is a nice point from Cassie. Reflective rambling here in the chat. She's talking about there's parallel here to Miriel's the Great Wave.
Yeah,
didn't think of that.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, there's certainly a visual parallel to be made there. And so this is the end of the episode. I don't have too much to say about this shot at this point, other than that it's just, crazy way to end an episode. And definitely first time in, adrenaline was pumping watching this scene, because we knew it was coming at some point, but I really wasn't expecting it at the end of this one, except for when they gave it away with that scene with Waldreg getting away. I was thinking, maybe he's going to be involved in what's going to happen here. But I thought this would be next episode we would get to see Mount Doom erupt. But now we've got to deal with the fallout from it. I suppose my only other thought on this shot and this final scene of the show, of the episode, was Galadriel's kind of breakdown that she has, where she just sort of stops moving and stares into the distance as the inevitable approaches. Is she may be having a kind of PTSD moment where she's thinking about the Dagor Bragollach here.
Yeah.
And so that was, I don't think I thought that first time, but certainly second time round, I was thinking about that.
I think I mentioned that in my review as well.
She seems to have, PTSD or the Elvish equivalent or whatever they would call it. So this is what I'm thinking about here now as we analyze it. But
it's a pretty cool scene that now, like it also ties so well to the scene in the barn as well, where she talks to Adar, and she, as I said, maybe she really thinks when she killed Sauron and all the orcs, the evil is gone. But this evil wasn't even caused by Sauron, maybe distantly indirect. It was caused by a relic of Morgoth, which she also could, maybe this is a scene, even though it probably will also, give her a lot of struggle in the next few episodes. It's a scene where she realizes that she can maybe put the evil at bay, but she can't never fully defeat it or remove it from the equation of the world how it is right now. And so I could expect some character development and so on, and this realization out of this. And this maybe forms her also more towards the Galadriel we know from the third. It's very slowly, of course, but in the direction.
Yeah, this is definitely going to be a formative moment for the character, you would think. For several characters in this scene, it's going to awake the Númenóreans to the very real, ever-present danger of evil in the world again as well, and this is going to set up their future military interventions. Things them being caught up in these events. It's difficult to say how they're going to marry what happens in the books with the Númenóreans with the condensed timeline that they have, but my theory on that is that the earlier intervention of the Númenóreans in the books, where they intervene in the War of the Elves and Sauron in the middle of the Second Age, will be combined with their intervention in Mordor when they capture Anatar or Sauron, basically. I should probably stick with Sauron, who's post Anatar at this point, but that will be how they'll condense that plot line so that those two events will happen simultaneously, which doesn't really massively affect the story potentially. But anyway, we'll see future military interventions from the Númenóreans, and I suspect that Pharazôn, based on what he said in the previous episode, will support that because of his political ambitions, and Miriel, knowing what's just happened and what she's witnessed and survived, will be keen to aid the elves against evil. So yeah, you can see the implications all over. What I'm interested in the next episode really is thinking about the effect that this might have on some of the other storylines, because we've got the Harfoots not too far away, sort of north of Mordor. You wonder whether they're going to see what happens on the horizon from where they are, because I mean it looks as though they're headed up towards like the Sea of Rhûn, potentially. So they're quite far away, but potentially not too far to be able to see this in the distant horizon. And whether Meteor Man, whether the Stranger will sense it on some level as well, because he's clearly highly attuned to magic and is a powerful character, and perhaps he will have a kind of a moment like Obi-Wan in Star Wars, where he feels as though, I'm forgetting the exact quote, voices all crying out all at once and suddenly silence, etc.
Yeah.
That's the line I'm thinking of.
I just figured after those flames envelop Galadriel, next episode she'll now be the mother of dragons. Her hair will be really short and everybody will freak out about that. But
I kind of hope not, but Game of Thrones reference. That was around this time at the end of the first season of Game of Thrones. Yeah. So yeah, it'd be interesting next week. As I said at the beginning, this has been my favorite episode thus far, so I'm more excited than I've been so far going into the show. There's a bunch of questions that we'll hopefully get answers to next week. We'll explore some of the immediate reaction to what happened. We'll catch up with the Harfoots again and find out what's going on with those priestesses and the walls and stuff. That whole storyline, we'll get back to that.
The priestesses I completely forgot about. It's like they showed one little scene and never went back to them again.
Well, there's very few scenes that we haven't seen now from the trailers, and one of them was the leaf being like set on fire and blown out of her hand. So I'm assuming that might be next week or the week after.
Very, very curious where they go from here. I could imagine also that maybe Theo is searching maybe Waldrick at some point, and maybe wants to get his sword back, and maybe then he meets Adar as well. So
I'll be back next week with another panel. So all of you that have been watching this entire episode, I really appreciate it, and I think we should wrap things up here because I've kept my lovely gentlemen guests long enough. It is 3:30 in the morning for Chris, so massive thank you to you, Chris.
No problem.
I hope you get to sleep soon. One more time, I'll just give you a quick shout out for anybody that doesn't already know what you do. Timbo, or Timbo Took on YouTube, does Bob Ross / Lord of the Rings Middle Earth mashup channel, which is pretty much my favorite thing on the internet.
Thank you.
It's just a wonderful channel. A talented painter, as you can see behind him. All his links are in the description below. And Chris from ThePhilosophersGames, potentially my favorite Tolkien lore YouTuber as well. So literally two of my favorite people on the internet right here. And next week I'll have hopefully I'm reaching out to people now for next week. So hopefully I'll have another big, nice round table of guests. So stay tuned, basically. So yeah, that's all from me. Did you guys have any last words before we head out?
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. This was fun.
Cool.
Yeah, same. It was a lot of fun discussing that with you. Of course, it took some time to discuss this episode, but also liked it a lot. So yeah, but it's always awesome with coming together with other creators and analyzing everything and geeking out some a bit here and there. Let's all hope they develop the show in a good direction. But yeah, thank you for having me, Dan, as well. It was pretty awesome here.
Perfect. All right. We'll see you all again next week. And hopefully I'll have a video out midweek this week as well, actually, a lore video. Like pretty much like a few hours away from finishing my editing on my current video. So definitely have a video out in the next day or two. But good night, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.